I walked into that office expecting a normal day, just paperwork and a few awkward smiles. But as Marion's words dripped with arrogance, I felt the ground beneath me crumble. He spoke about my wife like she was his. My blood boiled, but I kept my cool, knowing that behind every smirk was a secret that could destroy me. Bud and Marion, they think they've won, but they have no idea who they're up against. They've turned my life into a battlefield, and I'm ready to burn it all down. I arrived at work the next morning right at 8 a.m. Nobody paid me much attention as I headed straight to my office. My secretary, Shirley Cunningham, had gathered a large stack of paperwork for me to review while I was away. I could tell right away that this part of the job would be the hardest. Around 10 o'clock, I was called into Bud Roberts' office. Seated across from his desk was Marion Lawson, the Mason County attorney. I had seen him many times before, but we had never really met. My instincts were telling me something was off. "Patrick, this is our county attorney, Marion Lawson." "Marion, this is my new captain and chief deputy, Pat Quinn." Marion stood up. "Pat, it's an honor to meet you. We're all very proud of you. You're quite the hero." I felt myself blush at the praise. Marion sat back down. Bud was looking at me with a silly grin. Marion had that same smile. Suddenly, the compliment didn't feel sincere. "Marion will be working closely with you sometimes, so I thought it would be good for you two to meet. Oh, I have to step out for a moment. I'll be back soon." I felt a little awkward as Marion watched me from his chair. "You know, Patrick," he said with that silly grin, "I met your wife a while ago. Bud introduced us at a meeting." My expression changed as he talked. "Your wife is impressive. You've got a great partner. You're a lucky man, Patrick." "Why are you talking about my wife like that?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Now Marion was smiling widely. "Let's just say it was nice getting to know her." The way he said it made everything clear. Bud was talking about my wife with the county attorney. I felt anger rising inside me. I wanted to confront him right away, but just then, Bud came back into the office. "Did I miss anything good while I was away?" Bud and Marion exchanged knowing looks. "All right, Patrick, you can go back to your desk," Bud said like he was dismissing a child. I clenched my fists, feeling the strongest anger I had felt since I found out about the affair. I turned and headed back to my desk, knowing this wasn't the right time to confront anyone. I spent the rest of the day simmering in my office. Whenever I felt like I was managing the situation, Bud or Clarissa would say or do something that made me feel worse. The affair was one thing when it was just between me, Bud, and Clarissa. But now, with Marion involved, it felt like everything was spiraling out of control. I felt like my emotions were being crushed little by little. After work, I rushed home to the farm and spent the evening with the boys. I could see that Clarissa wanted to leave while I was around, but she also saw how happy the boys were to be with me. She stayed mostly in our room watching TV while the boys and I hung out downstairs. I stayed until the boys went to bed, and once more Clarissa wanted to talk before I left. "Patrick, we need to talk. Please stop ignoring me." "I'm not ignoring you, Claire. What do you think we need to discuss?" "We need to sort this out. We can't keep confusing the boys like this. They are old enough to understand." "Oh, really?" I said with a hint of sarcasm. "So, do you want to explain to them how their mother is making choices that change our family? Come on, Patrick. You know what I mean." "Oh, I see," I replied. "You want them to hear what you want them to hear, avoiding anything that makes you look bad. Calling me names isn't helping. Talking will." I sighed in frustration. "Why? Why are you doing this to me? How could you do this to our family? What made you lose respect for me?" After a moment, Clarissa responded, "It's not about disrespect. I was drawn to Bud's influence. People respect him, and some even fear him. He prefers being sheriff and has connections that helped me. I started receiving more recognition, and I couldn't help but feel attracted to that. So, the whole issue with your health was just a way to pull away from me emotionally? No, Patrick, it's real. The doctor gave me a cream around the same time I met Bud. So, once again, you're willing to help him in ways you wouldn't for me. Great, I said, turning to leave. What about the boys? You can't just come here every night. I walked up to her and looked her in the eye. This is still my house. I will come and go as I please and will be here every night after work until the boys are asleep. That's not up for discussion, is it clear? Bud won't be happy about this, Patrick. We need to create some separation. The boys won't adjust if you don't cooperate. This will continue until I decide it changes. What Bud wants doesn't matter to me. If he doesn't like it, that's his issue. I'll be home after work tomorrow, just like usual. The rest of the week will be the same. I closed the door a bit too hard as I left, hoping the boys were still asleep. The next morning, I went to work and tried my best to avoid Bud. Just after lunch, an event occurred that would change everything for me. Around 1:30 p.m., Bud came into my office and asked me to follow him with a serious look on his face. "We have a situation, Patrick," he said as we stepped into his office. "The Red River Falls Police Department is dealing with a standoff at 1830 North McKinley Avenue. A 27-year-old man is inside his home with his 5-year-old daughter. He was supposed to be babysitting while the mother was at work. The couple is no longer together, and he has been trying to get back together with her. Unfortunately, things took a turn for the worse, and he has locked himself and the girl in the house. We haven't been able to contact them for over 30 minutes, but the police believe they are still inside and likely safe." "Has the Special Operations Group been called in?" I asked. "Yes, that's why I called you in here. You were part of the team when you were a deputy. Now, as chief deputy, you'll take charge of the team." Bud," I said, "I know the basic tactics, but I've never led a tactical operation before." "I know," he said, "but I need you to step up. If you don't, it'll just give the police and Chief Banks a reason to take over the situation." So this was about control, I realized. Bud needed me to lead because he had to maintain the budget for the team. The county and local municipalities put in a lot of money to keep the Special Operations Group running. "You have 15 minutes to gear up and get to the scene. The armored vehicles are already on their way and the team members have been notified." "Okay," I replied. "I'm on it." I started to head out. "Just one more thing, Pat," he said, stepping closer to me. "Don't even think about using this situation to make me look bad. If you mess this up, I will make sure you face serious consequences. You'll be out for good. Do you understand?" I laughed lightly. "As much as I might want to get back at you, Bud, I'm not risking the life of that little girl. I'm going to get her out and ensure her father is held responsible. I'll smile for the cameras afterward and take pride in the good we did." Bud looked shocked by my words, but I hurried out the door before he could react. I quickly changed into my tactical uniform and grabbed my gear. I brought my Beretta 9mm, a tactical shotgun, and a 9mm submachine gun for the operation. I preferred the submachine gun for close encounters rather than my AR-15. The command center was set up 1 block south and 1 block west of the target house. Officers were placed around the house to watch it closely, making sure no one came in or out. Captain Pete Sturgeon from the RRFPD was at the command center with Chief of Police Clayton Banks. They had evacuated all homes in a 9-block area around the house they were focused on. In total, 15 officers from the police department, 8 deputies, and 5 state troopers were stationed at the scene. Besides me and Pete, 6 other officers joined for special operations, 3 deputies and 3 city officers. We had 2 updated Dodge Power Wagons once used in Vietnam, now turned into armored vehicles with strong steel plating. We also had a variety of technical gear and equipment, including powerful speakers for communication or distractions if needed. "No luck reaching anyone on the phone?" I asked Pete as I walked into the command center. "No. We've tried many times, but there's no response." "Any sign of activity?" "None. Not even a peek from the curtains." "All right, let's get started," I said, looking at a map on a laptop. "Actually, Pat," Pete started, "since this is your first special operation as captain, Chief Banks and I thought I should take the lead." "Pete, I don't want to argue about this. The sheriff has asked me to handle it a certain way," I replied. The 28E agreement between the county and Red River Falls outlined how the tactical team should operate, giving the sheriff overall authority. "Now listen, Pat, Pete began, but I interrupted him. "Pete, Chief, I don't want to discuss this anymore. This is how Bud wants it done. If the chief wants to talk to Bud about it, that's fine with me. Let's focus on bringing the girl back. We need to gather information about the house. What do we know?" Sturgeon and Chief Banks exchanged looks, realizing this conversation wasn't going to change. They knew they didn't want to deal with the sheriff's authority hanging over their heads. Pete sighed. "Well, we don't know much yet. According to the girl's mother, she left her daughter with the father while she went to work." Actually, he added, they're no longer together. Go on, I prompted. There seemed to be some disagreements between them after she dropped her daughter off this morning. She got worried and called him, and they had more arguments on the phone. He said some troubling things about himself and the child. The girlfriend returned to the house and saw that all the doors and windows were blocked. She could hear the TV inside, but no one answered when she called or knocked. It seems like a standoff since everything is secured from the inside, someone said. I needed to see inside the house. After trying the phone myself with no luck, I decided the best plan was to use some tools to get a look inside. I asked the city engineer for any available maps or drawings of the house's layout. The house was a simple single-story bungalow with 2 bedrooms, built in the late 1940s. It had a small front porch leading into the living room. To the right of the living room was a small dining room, and straight ahead was a hallway. The hallway led to a bedroom, a bathroom, and another bedroom on the right, while the kitchen took up the left side of the house. Overall, it was an easy layout to work with for setting up sound and video equipment. We planned to use small fiber optic cables to get a view inside. We would use small drills, needing only a very thin drill bit to bring the cables into the house. These cables would allow us to see into any room we placed them in. The video wouldn't be perfect, but it should be clear enough for us to check on the little girl and her father, especially since no one had spoken to them for over 2 hours. To set up the cables, we needed a distraction. I assigned my deputy team, Danny, Chris, and Alex, to manage the drills and place the cables. Another officer, Kirk, was tasked with connecting the cables to a device that would send the video back to our command center. Everyone had to work quickly, and in practice, these men had set up similar equipment in under 2 minutes. The distraction would come from loud sounds played through speakers on our armored vehicles. These speakers could project noise at very high volumes, drawing attention away from what we were doing. At a distance of 100 meters, a jet engine reaches about 140 decibels. I assigned 2 more team members, Michael and Dick, to drive the armored vehicles. My plan was for the vehicles to drive up to the front porch and make loud noises to attract the target to the front of the house. The sound would cover up the noise of our work as the team handled the cables inside. The idea was that the loud noise would draw the target outside, probably thinking something was happening. The target was a man named Colton Rigby, who was 25. His ex-partner and mother of his child was 23-year-old Cheyenne Teasdale. Their daughter was 5 years old, named Amber. Pete Sturgeon had worries about my plan. He thought creating a scene might make Rigby react badly. I believed that this method could help us learn more and make Rigby less alert, as he would not expect us to move if things got serious. Some team members seemed to agree with Pete, and I wanted to keep everyone united. I felt frustrated that Bud wasn't here to help manage Chief Banks if needed. I knew I had to be firm to keep the team's confidence and ease Pete's concerns. I set Pete up at the command post so he could watch the computer systems and let me know when the cameras were ready. The armored vehicle was prepared, and the sound system was ready to go. The placement team was in position, and everyone was ready for the mission. I gave the signal to start. The powerful vehicles roared to life and rushed down from both ends of the street. The placement team took their positions behind the nearby house. The armored vehicles lit up with flashing lights that turned on all at once. They stopped close to the porch, and the sound systems blasted a loud, high-pitched noise meant to confuse anyone inside. Right away, I saw the curtain in the front window move slightly, showing someone peeking out. The vehicles and the loud sounds were working as planned. The team finished their cable setup just 1 minute and 45 seconds in. They pulled back, and I called the armored vehicles back as well. Just like that, the neighborhood returned to silence. I jogged back to the command post, where Pete confirmed we had video from all 6 cameras. The cables were set up perfectly. Not long after I got back to the command post, my phone rang. It was the same number I tried to call before. I picked it up. "Hey, who is this?" Colton shouted from the other end. "This is Chief Deputy Quinn from the Mason County Sheriff's Department. Who am I speaking with? Don't even pretend you don't know who this is. What was going on here? You're scaring my daughter." "Please calm down, Mr. Rigby. We were trying to check if anyone was home." "Well, I'm here. What do you want?" "We called you many times, Mr. Rigby. We needed to see if anyone was inside your home. We just want to make sure your daughter Amber is safe." "She's fine. Just leave us alone." He sounded very upset. "Why are you hiding inside your house, Mr. Rigby?" I needed to understand his reasons. "I just don't want to be disturbed. I want you to go away." "I'm afraid we can't do that, Mr. Rigby. Miss Teasdale mentioned that you might be feeling upset about your daughter. You have no idea what I want. I just want to talk to her and sort things out. Do you understand?" He was clearly frustrated. "I can't send Cheyenne to speak with you if I feel she might be in danger, Mr. Rigby. Bring her here right now or things will get worse. I need to see her." He was getting more anxious. "I'll do my best, Mr. Rigby, but I need your promise that you won't harm yourself or Amber." "I'm not promising you anything. You need to do what I say. Get her here now." Suddenly, the call ended. I stepped away from the command center to our staging area, 1 block away. There, I saw Cheyenne Teasdale being cared for by an ambulance crew from the Red River Falls Fire Department. "Miss Teasdale?" I asked. "Yes?" Her eyes were red and puffy. She was a young woman, slim, with short blonde hair and blue eyes, with many tattoos and piercings. "I'm Chief Deputy Quinn. I'm in charge of responding to this situation. Can I ask you a few questions?" "I'll do anything to help get my daughter back." Cheyenne answered my questions with a lot of detail. She and Colton had dated in high school, and she got pregnant when she was 17. They both had tough childhoods. While Cheyenne tried her best, Colton faced many challenges and became harder to deal with. Eventually, they split up when Colton started being controlling. At first, it was only with words, but then it became worse. Recently, things got more serious when Colton was arrested for having illegal drugs, a big problem in Red River Falls. Cheyenne told me she planned to ask the court to limit his time with their child. I asked her why she had taken her daughter to his house today if she was going to make things stricter with him. The answer? He was out of work, and the usual daycare lady was sick. His daughter only went to preschool 3 days a week. This made things hard for her. She worried when she heard Colton learned about her plans to limit his time with their daughter. Cheyenne shared her concerns, stating that Colton likely had guns in his home. Some were taken when he was arrested, but she believed he had others hidden away. "Please, Mr. Quinn, please help me get my daughter back. I'm begging you. Please promise me you'll do everything you can for her." "I promise you, Miss Teasdale. I'm going to bring your daughter back safe. I promise." As I made my way back to the command post, I wondered if people were viewing me in a way I didn't feel I deserved. I tried to push that thought aside, along with other worries in my life. I needed to focus on bringing the little girl home. When I returned to the command post, I noticed that Pete Sturgeon and Chief Banks seemed to be discussing something while I was away. "Pat, can we talk?" Pete asked, and motioned for me to step aside with him. We walked a short distance from the command post. "What's up, Pete?" "Pat, I think I should take charge of this situation." "Why do you think that?" He paused before responding. "I believe you're too new to lead this team in such a sensitive case. I believe we need a calm approach. I glanced around and saw the rest of the team observing us. I was unsure if they could hear, but it didn't really matter to me." "Listen, Pete," I replied. "The first part has gone well. We have the house ready and we've made contact. We know the little girl is okay. I've handled that so far and it's gone well. Now I need your support and focus if we need to make a move." "My focus is here, Pat." "No, it isn't, Pete. Not while you're thinking about taking charge. Let's head back and go over a plan to get that little girl back." I didn't wait for an answer and walked back to the command post. When I arrived back, the phone was ringing. "Captain Quinn," I answered. "Where is that girl?" "Mr. Rigby, it has only been 15 minutes since we last spoke. Miss Teasdale is understandably upset right now." His early call indicated he was getting more anxious. "I want her at my door in the next 5 minutes or else." "Or else what, Mr. Rigby?" His tone dropped to a chilling calmness. "You don't want to find out." "I need to go back and speak with her again, Mr. Rigby, and persuade her to see you. I ask for the full 30 minutes. There was silence for almost 30 seconds. "Fine. You have another 15 minutes. Not a second more. If Cheyenne isn't here soon, we might have a serious problem," he said. I felt a wave of fear at his words. "Gather the team," I told Pete Sturgeon. "We're moving in." "Wait a minute, Pat. What did he mean by that?" Pete asked, looking concerned. "He said she needs to be here in 15 minutes or he's going to hurt the child, maybe even himself." Did he really say that? Chief Banks questioned, surprised. I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. Yes, he did. He made a threat, and we need to respond. The rest of the team is coming together now. Pat, can I talk to you for a minute? Pete interjected. You can say whatever you want in the next 30 seconds. Then I'm briefing everyone on the plan. I really think I should lead this operation, Pat. And I think you need to focus on your own role, Pete. Pat, I'm trying to keep this professional, he started, but I stopped him. That's enough, I said firmly. You're off the team. If I can't rely on you, stay here and monitor the radio. Hey, Brian, I called to Brian Keller, one of our new deputies. He ran over from his spot on the perimeter. Yes, boss? Brian, I need you to manage the video feed from the target house. I want to keep track of the adult male and the little girl at all times. We've set up 6 cameras to cover all the rooms. Got it, boss. No problem. He quickly put on his headset and sat at the computer to monitor the feeds. Now I had someone I could trust for the information I needed. Pete looked frustrated. He glanced at Chief Banks for help but received none. They couldn't fully grasp the tension between me and Bud right now, and I had to use that to my advantage. While they might be irritated with me, neither would want to face Sheriff Bud Roberts' anger. At least that was a small comfort. I quickly outlined my plan. 2 armored vehicles would approach the target house from either end of the street when I gave the signal. They would come in with lights flashing, almost right at the front porch. We would likely use method to break in through the back door safely, minimizing the risk of harm to anyone inside, especially the little girl. The drivers of the armored vehicles climbed in and drove off to their spots. The entry team was made up of me and 4 other team members. The team was made up of 2 men who stood by the back steps. They would set off some charges to break in and then use loud distractions inside to confuse anyone there, especially Rigby. Once we got inside, my team and I would rush in, clear the rooms, take Rigby into custody, and make sure the little girl was safe. We formed a line, ready for action. This setup is called a stack, and it's how we enter buildings. I was in the front, followed by 4 other guys. Danny Larson was last, keeping an eye on the back. We got close to another house so we could stay hidden from where we wanted to go. I needed to check what was happening inside. Video, this is Breach. What do you see, Brian? Breach, video. The suspect is still in the front room. He's holding something. Hold on. A few seconds later, Brian responded. Breach, be careful. The suspect has what looks like a shotgun. Oh, no. We had taken too long, and now he had a weapon. Got it. All team members, this is Quinn. Get ready to enter on my signal. I counted down from 10 to 0, giving us a moment to prepare. Video, where is the little girl? Entry, the little girl is still in the closet in the first bedroom to your left when you come in from the back. Brian was doing really well under pressure. Let's go in. APC 1 and APC 2, move out. I could hear the armored vehicles coming closer with their loud sirens. Set the charges now. The team quickly put the charges on the back door. Once I felt the armored vehicles in front of the house, I shouted, blow the doors! The controlled explosion opened the back door, letting us move inside. The team pulled the pins from flashbangs and threw them down the hallway to confuse anyone inside. The loud blasts went off as we entered the house. I held my weapon ready as we moved carefully through the smoke. In the living room, I saw a confused man on the floor trying to grab something. Police! I yelled. Get down on the floor! In that moment, I knew I needed to act fast and decided to use my taser instead of a lethal option. I aimed and fired, and the dart stuck into his shoulder and neck, stopping him without causing serious harm. The taser delivered strong pulses that caused Rigby to scream and then fall face down on the floor. I quickly moved towards Rigby, pressing my knee down to keep him secured. The second officer to enter the house behind me was State Trooper Ken Flatness. He quickly moved to secure Rigby, putting his hands behind his back. From behind us, I heard 3 men call out, "Clear!" They let us know that the rest of the house was safe and clear. Danny Larson, the last to come in, found a little girl hiding in a closet. She was very scared, covering her ears as she trembled. Our black uniforms with helmets and gear only made her more frightened. We were carrying a lot of equipment. Ken Flatness and I checked Rigby to make sure he wasn't hiding anything dangerous. Rigby seemed a bit out of it from the taser. Ken praised me for keeping my cool. Another officer took Rigby's shotgun, checked it, and confirmed it was loaded. I respected that weapon, especially after an earlier encounter. I spoke into my headset. All personnel, this is Chief Deputy Quinn. The building is secure and the suspect is in our control. I heard responses from everyone on the radio, and the noise from the armored vehicles faded away. We did a quick search of the house to make sure there were no more surprises, and thankfully, there weren't any. When we helped Rigby to his feet, we noticed he had lost control due to the taser. I let Brian Keller know we were leaving the building and heading to the command post, asking for paramedics to meet us there to check on Rigby. Before leaving, I approached Danny Larson to comfort the little girl, Amber, who had stopped crying but still looked scared. I took off my helmet and gear and placed my weapon on my back. "Hi there," I said gently. "My name is Patrick." "What's your name?" I asked. "Amber," she replied, still sniffling. "Would you like me to take you to your mommy, Amber?" She nodded and hugged me tightly, resting her head on my shoulder. We made our way out of the front of the house after moving a piece of furniture that blocked the door. I felt proud as I carried her back to her waiting mother. This was my first rescue mission, and it had gone well, despite some complaints from Pete Sturgeon. I knew the news cameras would be ready at the staging area to capture the moment I reunited a mother and daughter. It was a chance for a touching reunion and a way for me to show my worth. As we got to the command post, Brian Keller stood up, shook my hand, and said, "Great job." "Great job yourself, Brian. I couldn't have done it without you," I replied honestly. Pete Sturgeon and Chief Banks glanced at me with a look of envy as we passed by. I couldn't help but smile a little. As we turned the corner to the staging area, the crowd started cheering loudly. Little Amber raised her head, curious about the noise. "Why are they cheering?" she asked. "Because they are excited," I said. "They are cheering for you because you are the bravest girl ever." Hearing this, her face lit up with happiness. We reached the police barricade, and the officers let Cheyenne Teasdale come rushing to her daughter. I handed Amber to her mother, who hugged her tightly, tears of joy on her cheeks. After a few moments, I helped her stand and led her back to the staging area, where paramedics were ready to check on her. Cheyenne held me tightly, thanking me again and again. Cameras clicked, and reporters shouted questions my way. I told them there would be a press conference later for more information, and that I couldn't answer right then. As I turned to leave, I noticed someone at the edge of the police line. It was Shannon Sullivan, wearing blue medical scrubs. She smiled widely and shook her head as I walked up to her. "Well, it's great to see you," I said, beaming. "And look at you, the hero of the day," she replied. "What brought you here?" I asked. "I knew you would be involved as soon as I heard it on the news. I worked an extra shift and got off at 3. I live just a few blocks away. I wanted to support you and see you succeed, so here I am." Wow, I thought. Someone really believed in me. I pushed away the thought of wishing my wife saw me like Shannon did. We talked for a few more minutes, but soon I felt the cameras and photographers focusing on us, preparing to take pictures. I knew they would connect me with Shannon in their stories. "I wish I could stay and chat, but I have a lot of paperwork to get through, and I'll be here for a while," I said. "I understand," she replied. "Great job today, Patrick. You'll always be my hero," she said with warmth, her smile brightening the moment. I took her hand and squeezed it, smiled back, and then turned to leave. I didn't really want to go. I could have talked to Shannon all night, but I had to keep moving. Back at the command post, Colton Rigby was being checked one last time before heading to jail. Brian Keller asked for the chance to take Rigby to county jail and handle his booking. But before he left, Rigby had a few words for me. "You didn't have to use a taser on me, you know. You were reaching for a weapon," I replied calmly. "You're lucky you didn't get hurt." "Yeah? I'll get out of any trouble you try to throw my way," he said with a grin. "Any trouble? Wow, Colton. You make it sound like you'll only face one charge. If you decide to take me on, you'll have to deal with all of them. And that includes serious federal charges. Right now, you're facing a long time in prison." "That's not true. I know how this works. You're just trying to make me talk, and I'll likely do only a few years at the most." "You really don't understand this, Colton. You're forgetting one big thing. There's no early release in federal cases. If the judge says 20 years, you'll serve every single day. Honestly, you don't give us any reason to lessen your charges at all. I know Lane Danielson, the U.S. attorney here. He wins almost every case he takes. You will be no trouble for him at all. Your daughter could be nearly a grandmother by the time you get out." The confident look on Colton's face faded. His determination turned to worry as Brian Kelly helped Rigby into the back of his police car. I saw a tear roll down his face as the car drove away toward the county jail. I couldn't focus on my work for the rest of the night. I couldn't tell if I was feeling a rush from the successful rescue or happiness from seeing and talking to Shannon. I didn't leave the scene until almost midnight. I wanted to go home and see my boys, but they were already asleep by then. Instead, we handed over control of the place to the state investigators, and I called it a night. Even the drive back to my simple motel didn't bother me, and I fell into a deep, peaceful sleep without needing a drink. I didn't dream about anything bad from the day. I dreamed about Shannon. The next morning, I showed up for work later than usual, walking into the office around 10:30. Bud was waiting outside his office when I arrived. "Geez," he said. "I was starting to think you weren't going to show up." "I thought I earned a little extra time off from yesterday," I replied. "Don't get too comfortable, Patrick, and don't take too much time off either. You still need to put in a full day just like everyone else," he said. "Oh, I get it. Just like the full day you had yesterday during the standoff?" "Sure. If I didn't know any better, I'd think Chief Banks and Pete Sturgeon really missed you. Your absence was definitely noticed." Bud's voice dropped. "I'm warning you, Patrick." "Or what?" I asked. "Or you know what could happen," he answered. "This could still go badly for you, Patrick. You might not be chief deputy for as long as you think. You're still just a small player here, and I can change that if I want to." I glanced around the office. Luckily, none of the other deputies or staff seemed to notice what we were talking about. "Oh, really? What do you think you can do?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Bud stood a little taller, a crafty smile appearing on his face. "Like I said before, Patrick, you need to accept that whatever I plan to do will happen. Understood? Well, I'm starting to feel differently. After all, I just saved a little girl from a dangerous person. That's 2 lives I've saved in 6 months. Pretty impressive, right?" I smiled back. "Patrick," Bud said, grinning slyly, "I'll let you enjoy this small win. You earned it, I guess. But at the end of the day, things will still go my way. So go ahead and celebrate. I'm still in charge. Don't forget that." With that, he walked into his office. I gritted my teeth and went into my own office. I wanted to call him out on his attitude. I remembered I had mentioned his absence during the hostage situation yesterday. If he really had been around while I was facing a tough situation, I would have plenty to say about how he treated me and my work. But I wasn't sure how to approach it. I had bigger things to focus on right now. I needed to prepare my notes for the press conference and review the details of the standoff. The press conference started at 2 p.m. and lasted almost an hour. During that time, Bud shared some details about the event, and Chief Banks spoke too. Both of them played the role of politicians well. However, about 20 minutes into the conference, when Bud opened the floor to questions, a reporter asked if they could hear from me instead. Bud couldn't refuse, so he let me take a few questions. To his dismay, I ended up answering question after question for the rest of the hour. By 3 p.m., Bud had to wrap up the conference. The reporters didn't ask him anything, which was too bad. I would have liked to hear someone ask him, "Where were you during the standoff, Sheriff Roberts?" That would have been entertaining. On our way back to our offices, it was clear that Bud was very frustrated about me taking over the Q&A part of the press conference. All the questions I received were very kind, and I couldn't help but feel pleased with the attention. I figured it would be easier for Bud to keep me around if everyone thought I was a hero. Around 4 o'clock, I was getting ready to leave when my secretary, Karen, buzzed me on the phone. She told me I had a visitor. I said to let them in and quickly tidied up my office, which wasn't too messy since I hadn't been there long enough. My last boss, Floyd, was always very organized. "Patrick!" It was Shannon's cheerful voice. "Shannon, wow! It's great to see you 2 days in a row. You must be lucky." We greeted each other with a quick hug, and I felt happy to have her nearby. "Please, have a seat." "Okay," she replied. "But I can't stay long. Bridget is at home with my mom and needs to leave by 4:30. "I understand. I'm just happy to see you. I'll take whatever time you have." It was nice to have her there. "I came by to see if we could invite you to dinner this week as a thank you from Bridget and me." "You don't have to do that. You've already been so kind to me while I was recovering." "True, but you also helped my little girl, Inviting you and your family over is the least we can do." I sighed and looked down for a moment when she said that. "Oh, did I say something wrong?" she asked, looking worried. "No, not at all. It's just that, well, things are tough at home right now. I wish they were better, but they're not." Shannon's expression changed to one of concern. "I'm so sorry to hear that. I can't imagine how this has been for your family." To be honest, it has been building for a while, even before the incident. I've actually moved out for now. I hope it's just temporary, but I'm ready if it doesn't change. I didn't know why I was telling her this. She just made me want to share. I had no idea. I'm really sorry you're going through this. Even if your family can't join, the invitation still stands. Bridget would love to see you again. She talks about you often and really hopes you can come for dinner." "Thank you, Shannon. That's very thoughtful of you both." I could tell she felt I might decline, and she looked disappointed. "I just think now might not be the best time." I paused. Wait, I still needed to eat, right? And why not enjoy a meal with two people I liked? "Actually, Shannon, I've changed my mind. Dinner with you and Bridget sounds wonderful. I would love to be your guest." Shannon's face lit up with happiness. "Oh, that sounds amazing. You'll love it, Patrick. I make a fantastic rack of lamb. I can't wait to tell Bridget. She'll be so happy." "I should bring some flowers or a little gift to thank her for being so nice," I replied. "Oh my, if you do that, she might want you to stay forever." I noticed a little awkwardness in Shannon's response, but I didn't mind. "Well, if you're as good a cook as you say, maybe I won't want to leave either. Is 6 o'clock Friday night good for you?" "That would be perfect." I stood up to see her out of my office. There was a brief moment where I would usually shake hands, but Shannon reached out and hugged me instead. This was a longer hug and made me feel a special kind of connection that I couldn't explain. Her scent filled the air, and my heart raced again. Why did she affect me this way? I noticed a couple of deputies in the office watching us. Reluctantly, we let go of the hug. "I'll see you Friday night then." "At 6 o'clock sharp," she said with a smile. "Don't be late or Bridget will give you a hard time," she joked. I watched Shannon leave my office and walk down the hall toward the elevator. Even the deputies couldn't help but watch her as she walked by. When the elevator door closed, they exchanged looks and silently said, "Wow." When I got home that night, I was thrilled. I hadn't seen my boys in 2 days, and they were excited to hear about the situation with the little girl and how the team and I helped her. Clarissa made a nice dinner that night to keep things normal for the boys. I stayed up playing video games with the boys until their bedtime, which didn't please Clarissa. She didn't like video games and thought the boys should spend more time outside. Out of all the games, Call of Duty was her least favorite. So, we played together for about 3 hours. After the boys were settled in for the night, I was getting ready to leave for the motel when Clarissa came up to me, wanting to talk. "Patrick, I need you to do me a favor and spend the weekend with the boys here on the farm." "From when to when?" I asked. "I'll be leaving Friday afternoon to go to the city with some friends for a weekend away," she said casually. "Absolutely not." "What?" she replied, surprised. "Are you saying I can't go?" "No, I'm not. But I can't stay with the boys on Friday. I have a commitment that night I really can't change." "You have to, Patrick. I really need some time for myself." "Oh, come on, Clarissa. Let's be honest here. You're planning to see Bud, aren't you?" "Why pretend otherwise? Your sister can't watch them at her house and they can't take care of themselves." "That means you have to do this, Patrick." "Don't say that," I answered firmly. "Say what?" "Don't use the boys to try to get me to say yes to a weekend trip for you and Bud. I've already said no. I have plans for Friday and I won't change them. You'll need to wait for your little getaway." I left the house quickly before she could say anything else. The next morning at the office, Bud was waiting outside his office looking unhappy. He clearly didn't like that I wouldn't take care of the boys so he could have a weekend away. That was his issue. Bud always did what he wanted. I might not be able to stop him, but I wanted to find a way to help. As I thought about it, I started to wonder where Bud had been during the recent crisis. It would mean a lot if Bud had been at my house while I was out helping someone. I needed to find out where he really was, and if I could prove it. The week went by slowly as I looked forward to dinner with Shannon and Bridget on Friday. But Friday finally came. I left work early that afternoon and made sure to finish all my tasks. just so Bud couldn't blame me later for taking time off. I also wanted to leave work before he found me and gave me unexpected chores that would make me late for dinner. I turned off my cell phone to be safe. Tonight, I wanted to focus completely on Bridget and Shannon. I reached their doorstep right at 5:58 p.m. according to my watch. I had time to take a quick shower and change into clean, casual clothes. There was fresh snow on the ground from earlier in the week, and the sledding hill was just a short walk from Shannon and Bridget's house. I decided to surprise Bridget with a new toboggan to thank her for dinner. I also brought a small bouquet of flowers for the table and a bottle of wine from a winery in Minnesota. Bridget was so happy with the sled and couldn't wait to plan a day at the sledding hill. Shannon loved the flowers and was impressed with the wine. She wore a simple dress with a lovely hand-woven shawl over her shoulders. Their house was a cozy, single-story bungalow, much like the one where the recent crisis happened. It was decorated simply but very nicely. Shannon and Bridget had been decorating their home for Christmas. They had even put Bridget's letter to Santa on the refrigerator, ready to be sent to the North Pole. Shannon had really gone all out with dinner. She made a delicious rack of lamb, a dish I had never tried before but smelled amazing. For dessert, she prepared a fruit salad, fresh asparagus, and creamy mashed potatoes with garlic and butter. The two of them looked so happy in the soft glow of the two candles that lit the room during our meal. The atmosphere was as nice as the finest restaurants, and I couldn't think of two better people to share the evening with. Bridget had also helped make homemade brownies topped with vanilla ice cream and hot fudge. I was tempted to have second servings of everything, but I didn't want to eat too much. Even though Shannon insisted that I relax, I offered to help clear the table and wash the dishes since she didn't have a dishwasher. After dinner, we enjoyed a fun game of Monopoly. Bridget was on a roll, buying lots of properties and even getting a hotel on Marvin Gardens. As she yawned, it was clear she was getting sleepy. We agreed to count our money at the end, and it turned out Bridget had nearly 3 times more than Shannon and me combined. Proudly, she went to her room to change into pajamas, brush her teeth, say her prayers, and prepare for bed. Bridget almost made me tear up when she asked her mom if I could read her a story at bedtime. Shannon looked touched and said, "Of course." She stood by the door while we read The Velveteen Rabbit. By the time we were halfway through, Bridget had fallen asleep with her head on my shoulder. I kept reading until the end, then gently brushed her hair as she slept. When I walked into the living room, Shannon had changed into her nice jeans and a Minnesota State Mankato sweatshirt. She offered me a glass of wine, which I took despite my better judgment. We settled onto the sofa together. The warm light from the candles on the dinner table mixed with other candles Shannon had lit, creating a cozy and inviting atmosphere. I found it hard to keep my feelings in check as Shannon looked even nicer than ever. An old college sweatshirt and a pair of worn-out jeans looked great on her tonight. "I want to thank you for coming tonight, Patrick. You really made Bridget's day," she said, taking my hand. "You made me happy, too." "Thanks," I replied, and we tapped our wine glasses together. "So, how long have you and Bridget lived here?" "This house used to belong to my father. It wasn't very nice until we made it our own. I got pregnant with Bridget when I was just 17, and she was born during my senior year at Red River High. We lived with my parents for 2 years while I went to Red River Falls Community College and got my nursing degree. Then I went to Mankato for my bachelor's in nursing. It was tough being away from Bridget during the week, only seeing her on weekends. But I finished school in just 3 semesters, so it felt worth it in the end." "That sounds like a lot of hard work," I said. "I can only imagine how difficult that was. Were you on your own the whole time?" "Yeah, I was. Billy and I didn't stay together long after Bridget was born." "I assume he wasn't the same man I saw on the highway last August," I said, trying to understand. "Billy was just a young crush for me. He was older, and I found that interesting. My father didn't like him. He was worried about the age difference. But I was too young and stubborn to listen. Then I started feeling sick every morning and realized I was expecting." "Were your parents upset?" "Oh my gosh! My mother cried for almost a week. I could handle that. What really hurt was how my father reacted. I bet he was very upset. No, not really. It was the opposite. He didn't talk to me for almost a month. He was disappointed and also angry with himself for not stopping me. I've always been close to my dad, and it broke his heart." "I can imagine. Sometimes I think I'm lucky to have boys, I said. It took time, but once Bridget was born, she became everything to them. Billy came around less and less. When he got involved with bad choices and spent time away, he barely showed up, which was okay with all of us. The last time he came by, it ended with my father stepping in. That was almost 6 years ago. Eventually, we got a restraining order and then worked on ending his rights as a parent. Billy didn't resist. Wow, remind me never to cross your dad. Oh, don't worry about that. Just promise to treat me well, unlike Billy, and you're good. In fact, my dad is looking forward to meeting you. She stopped suddenly. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. It sounds like we're dating or something. I noticed her cheeks get a little red. Maybe the wine was taking effect. Don't worry about it, you're fine. I'd really like to meet your family one day, I said. Shannon set her wine glass down. Tell me about your family. I grew up in western Iowa. My dad, who I haven't talked to in years, is a successful lawyer and runs his own law firm. He has offices in a few cities. He's always been disappointed that I chose to become a police officer instead of following in his footsteps. What about your mom? She asked gently. My mom passed away last January after dealing with lung cancer for a long time. I'm so sorry, Shannon said, placing her hand on my arm. Her touch was comforting. It's okay. She fought hard for almost 3 years. I'm relieved she's not in pain anymore. What made you move to Red River Falls? She asked curiously. My sister Beth and her husband moved here a while ago with their children. Her husband is a local attorney and grew up nearby. After I finished school with degrees in criminology and psychology, I applied to the police department here. And now you're with the sheriff's department. Which do you like more? That's a tough question. I think life was simpler at the police department, but my family seemed happier when I started at the sheriff's office and we moved to the countryside. It worked out well for everyone except for me, I said, taking another sip of my wine. What do you mean? She asked, genuinely curious. I paused for a moment, unsure if I should share what was on my mind, but the wine was loosening my tongue. I began to tell her everything that had been bothering me. I explained how Bud and Clarissa seemed to have worked together to get me hired, and how that ended up creating a complicated situation for me. I talked about the conference in Minnesota and coming home to find them together, confirming my worries. It felt like I had been promoted just to draw me closer to Bud, hiding his connection with Clarissa. I shared how Bud was planning to leave his wife and pursue Clarissa, leaving me feeling hurt and betrayed. I was also worried that I might lose my job and face serious accusations. Shannon listened quietly as I shared my thoughts for about 20 minutes. The only thing I didn't mention was the awkward moment between me and my soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law. When I finally looked up, I saw tears in Shannon's eyes. She took my wine glass and placed it on the coffee table, then hugged me tightly, as if she wanted to protect me. "Oh, Patrick," she whispered, "how could anyone treat you this way? How could they not see the good person you are? Especially after everything you've done to keep people safe," she said softly, her voice trembling as she leaned against my shoulder. In that moment, she felt like a lifeline to me, something that reminded me of my worth. In her eyes, I was still someone who mattered, something I had forgotten for a long time. "Thank you," I whispered in her ear as we continued to hold each other. "Thank you for helping me find a part of myself that I thought was lost." Shannon slowly released her embrace and stepped back, wiping her tears with her sleeve. For a few moments she looked at me intently, as if searching for something deep within me. Then she placed both hands on my face and leaned in, giving me a gentle and heartfelt kiss. The warmth and sincerity of that kiss took me by surprise, leaving me speechless. "Patrick, I'm sorry," she said, pulling back. "I don't know why I did that. I didn't let her finish." I gently pulled her close again, returning her kiss with the same warmth. She responded with a soft sigh, and we held each other in that quiet moment. We embraced, finding comfort in each other's presence. As we held one another, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Our connection was genuine, built on mutual respect and understanding. She closed her eyes and gently ran her fingers through my hair as we shared this tender moment, simply holding each other. Suddenly, Shannon pulled away and stood up. With a determined look, she began to take off her sweatshirt. "Patrick, Tonight I want to do something special for you. I want to show my gratitude for everything you've done for me and my daughter," she said softly. "Shannon, you don't have to." "Shh," she interrupted, placing a finger on my lips. "Please let me do this. It's something I need to do. I haven't felt this close to anyone in over 7 years, and I want to share this moment with you." She leaned in and kissed me gently. I watched as Shannon, with quiet resolve, removed her sweatshirt. Her eyes stayed locked with mine, and the connection between us grew stronger. She continued to remove her outer clothing, revealing a calm and confident demeanor. She stood before me, simply dressed, her presence filled with quiet strength. There was something about her that brought warmth and sincerity to the room. I reached out my hand, which she took, and pulled her closer to me. We stood together, our closeness saying more than words could express. We embraced, sharing a connection that felt real and comforting. As we held each other, I felt a deep sense of peace. The moment was about more than just being close. It was about two people finding comfort and understanding in one another. There was something about this woman that I found truly enchanting, and I was determined to enjoy every moment with her. After some time, Shannon gently pulled back from me. "I just realized," she said with a playful smile, "that you're a bit too dressed up for this party." Shannon started by helping me take off my shoes and socks. Then, she loosened my pants and helped me stand as she took off my sweater and t-shirt. Finally, she slid my khaki pants down and removed them completely. I stood there in just my boxers, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. As she noticed the scars on my right shoulder, arm, chest, and leg, Shannon's face softened. She reached out and gently touched each scar, her fingers moving carefully. The kindness in her touch spoke volumes. With a light-hearted grin, Shannon looked at me. "Why, Sheriff Quinn," she giggled. "Are you happy to see me?" Her joke eased the tension, and I couldn't help but smile back. "I'm really glad you're here," I said, feeling a deep connection. "You haven't seen anything yet, Patrick," she said with warmth in her voice. With that, we moved to the sofa and shared a quiet moment, enjoying each other's company. Shannon was gentle and caring, and I admired her thoughtfulness. I wanted to make sure this moment was about more than just being close. So I guided her to sit on the couch while I knelt in front of her, resting my hands on her knees. We shared a quiet, special moment, savoring the closeness between us. As I held her, I could feel our connection growing, bringing us closer together. Shannon reached out, her fingers lightly touching my face, and I felt a warmth in her gesture. We shared a look that said so much without needing any words. We stayed like that for a while, simply enjoying the comfort of being together. It became clear that our connection was deeper than just physical. It was about finding comfort and understanding in each other. As we continued to share this gentle moment, the bond between us became stronger, built on kindness and respect. Shannon looked at me, and I could feel the intensity of our connection. "Now, Patrick, I want to share this moment with you." She stood up from the couch and encouraged me to sit where she had been. We found ourselves close again, and I took a moment to adjust, overwhelmed by the feelings between us. We held each other for a while, simply being present together. Shannon gently held my face in her hands, her eyes meeting mine. The connection between us felt almost magical, filled with both feelings and comfort. We moved together slowly at first, letting the moment come naturally. The sense of togetherness was strong, and it felt like we truly belonged to each other. As we held each other, Shannon whispered softly, "Patrick, you make me feel so whole. I just want to give everything I have to you." Soon, we both felt a wave of emotions as we shared this special moment. The feelings grew slowly, and we found ourselves wrapped up in the experience. Afterward, we stayed close, holding each other in a gentle hug. The bond between us felt solid, bringing us both a deep sense of calm and happiness. It was almost playful, and Shannon giggled, which made the moment even warmer. "My goodness, Sean Patrick Quinn," she said with a smile. "Just how much happiness can you hold inside? I didn't know anyone could feel so much joy together." "Well," I chuckled, "to be honest, it's been so long since I felt like this that I nearly forgot how nice it is." Then reality hit me. "Oh no, I didn't take precautions." "Relax, cowboy. I just finished my cycle yesterday morning, so there's really no worry and we should be just fine. Trust me. I know what I'm talking about," she giggled. You're amazing, I said, leaning back. Remember when I said I probably wouldn't want to leave here tonight? She smiled warmly. Yes, I remember. I really wish I didn't have to go tonight. She leaned in closer. I wish you didn't either, Patrick. No matter what happens after tonight, you're going to be pretty hard to forget. What do you think tonight was all about? I asked. I don't know, Patrick. Maybe it was something so wonderful that you can't just call it one thing. I don't want this to be a passing moment, Shannon. We both deserve more than that. Yes, we do, Patrick, she said, snuggling beside me on the sofa. And I'll be honest with you. If there comes a time in the future when you find yourself single again, I'll definitely give you a little push. I wish I could promise you more, Shannon, I said. But I can promise that if that day comes, you will be the first person I call. Shannon smiled, and I raised my glass of wine. Here's to promises, I said. No, Shannon said gently. Let's toast to possibilities for now. Perfect. Shannon and I chatted for a long time, enjoying each other's company, before we realized just how close we had become. I finally got dressed and got ready to leave the comfort of Shannon's company for the cold December air as I walked back to my motel room. We exchanged phone numbers, which would make it easier to plan future outings. We also shared email addresses, and Shannon reminded me that I still owed Bridget a trip to the sledding hill to use her new toboggan. As I was about to go, we shared a warm hug at the door. The walk to my car felt longer than it actually was, even though I parked just across the street. When I returned to my motel, I decided to wait before taking a shower. For now, I just wanted to lie on the bed and think about her. I could still feel her presence with me. All of a sudden, my heart felt heavy as if I had realized something important. As I lay there remembering my time with Shannon, it hit me. I was falling in love with her. The next morning, I woke up feeling great. I even had to pinch myself to believe that everything from the night before was real. When I got in the shower and felt the warm water on my face, memories of our moments together came flooding back. I could feel her warmth again, and knew it had really happened. I felt so happy that I decided to drive out to the farm to spend the day with my boys. Clarissa was not happy to see me, and she seemed even more annoyed by my good mood. I figured the boys and I would have a fun day with pizza, loads of video games, and a movie in the evening. So you can have all this time today, but you didn't visit them last night? She asked. Nope. That was all I needed to say. I hope you realize how much Bud is going to be upset with you. If you thought it was bad before, you're in for it now. You could have at least done what he wanted, but instead, you made it more complicated. I knew she wanted to argue, but I wasn't going to take the bait. I decided to keep my thoughts to myself for now. I'm just saying, Clarissa, maybe instead of being so confrontational, you should think about how you talk. The situation may not turn out as you expect, so just keep that in mind. You're dreaming, Patrick, if you think this will end with us together. Uh-huh. I never said I wanted to be with you. Then what do you want, Clarissa? You are so frustrating. Why didn't I notice that before we got married? Clarissa didn't get a chance to answer because the boys came running down the stairs, excited and ready to go. We headed to Red River Falls and spent most of the day at a pizza place that had lots of video games, skee-ball, and many bowling lanes. I treated the boys, and we ended up spending almost $400 on food and games. We finished our day by visiting the Cineplex in the mall, where we enjoyed snacks, soda, and popcorn while watching a 3D movie on the big screen. We were amazed by the experience and agreed it was worth the extra money. Afterward, I took the boys home and found Clarissa curled up on the couch with a glass of wine and a book. She didn't look very happy, and I couldn't help but smile a bit. I stayed long enough to tuck the boys in for the night, then slipped out to avoid any more arguments. The next morning was Sunday. I decided to shower and go for breakfast at Denny's. After a decent omelet and pancakes, I attended late morning mass at St. Matthew's. I hadn't been to mass in a while and missed it, as well as seeing familiar faces. I thought a bit of church and some company would help with the loneliness of being away from my boys. Mass wrapped up right at noon. As I walked to the back of the church to greet our priest, I heard someone shout, "Patrick!" I turned and saw Bridget running toward me. I scooped her up in a big hug. I was happy to see Shannon come up behind her with her bright smile. There was another couple with Shannon, and I guessed they were her parents. Shannon and her mother looked a lot alike, with her mother appearing wonderfully youthful. "Shannon! What a surprise!" I said, trying to keep it casual. You too. Great to see you again, she replied, sharing my tone. Patrick, are you going to take me sledding soon? Bridget asked, full of excitement. You bet! There's a big snowstorm coming this week. We'll make sure to be the first ones on the hill. How does that sound? Yes, she exclaimed. Our little group moved aside so the other parishioners could exit the church easily. Patrick, I'd like you to meet my parents. This is my mother, Suzanne. Hello, nice to meet you, I said as I reached out my hand. It was clear where Shannon got her looks from. Thank you, Patrick. It's nice to meet you too, she replied warmly. And, Shannon said, this is my father, Jack. Nice to meet you, sir, I said as he shook my hand firmly. The pleasure is all mine, Patrick. I can't express how grateful we are for everything you've done for our family, he said. Oh, it's nothing, just doing my job, I replied. A janitor mopping a floor is just doing his job too, he said with a smile. He's not going to work every day worried about getting hurt, Jack said. That's true, I replied. I'm just happy I could help and that everything ended well. How are you feeling after your injuries? Suzanne asked. Oh, I'm almost completely better now. Thankfully, I had a wonderful nurse. I saw Shannon blush a little. And how have you been doing, Shannon? I'm doing well, she said with a smile. Life feels good these days. I had to hold back a laugh. Here we were in a church and Shannon was making a light joke about our last encounter. I tried hard to keep a straight face, even though it was tough. Luckily, her parents didn't seem to notice. So, Patrick, her mother asked, do you have any plans for the rest of the day? Well, I'm meeting some friends here soon to watch the Vikings game this afternoon. We usually get pretty excited when they play the Packers. Sounds fun, Jack said. The game will look great on our new TV. You're welcome to come over and watch it with us if you want. My wife makes a delicious roast beef, too. That's a kind offer, but I just had a late breakfast before church. I think my friends and I will enjoy a lot of snacks during the game. Plus, I tend to get pretty into it when I'm watching the Vikings, especially this year, I said, giving Bridget a gentle pat. Yeah, I get that, Jack laughed. The offer still stands if you change your mind. We chatted for a bit longer before saying goodbye. As we stepped out into the chilly December air, I watched Shannon and her family head to their car. To my joy, Shannon glanced back one last time and smiled and waved at me. I sort of lied about meeting friends that afternoon because I didn't want it to be awkward with Shannon's parents. It was a shame since I would have loved another home-cooked meal. Instead, I spent the afternoon watching the Vikings and Packers game at a local sports bar called The End Zone. I knew a lot of people there, and a few even bought me drinks in thanks for how I handled the situation last week. The drinks were nice, but the game didn't go well. My favorite team fought hard but lost another close match to the Packers in Green Bay. The next morning came too quickly. I made sure to be at work right at 8 o'clock. Bud didn't arrive until just after 9 o'clock, but he stopped in the doorway and gave me a look before settling in at his desk. I had spent a lot of the night thinking about what I needed to do about my problems with Bud and Clarissa. The more I thought about it, the more I realized there had to be some kind of clue left behind. As I thought back on talks with my friends, one conversation stood out. My son, Nick, mentioned that his mom spent a lot of time on the computer while I was at work. This got me thinking. Maybe there was some proof of what was going on, or even hints of Bud's future plans for me. I needed to find someone who could help, but I didn't know anyone who was skilled with computers. I looked over to the area where the deputies worked and spotted my good friend Danny Larson. He seemed to be finishing up a report and was likely headed back to his patrol car soon. Hey, Danny, can you wait a moment? I shouted to him. Sure, Pat. What's up? He replied. I quickly checked to see if Bud was watching, but he was turned away, talking on the phone. Let's grab a cup of coffee and chat for a bit, I suggested. We walked down the hall to the break room, and I put some coins in the vending machine to buy us some coffee. We sat down at a small booth. So, what's going on, Pat? Is everything okay? Danny asked. Yeah, everything's good. I just wanted to see if you know a lot about computers or if you know someone who does. I'm not a computer expert, but I can help if I can. What do you need? I'm looking for someone who knows the technical details well, I explained. Have you thought about Dean Strobe? He's the IT guy for our department, he suggested. Yeah, I said, but Dean works for the county only. Oh, then you might want to talk to Chris Hayes' partner, Danny said. His partner? Who is she? I asked. Danny laughed a bit. No, not a wife. I just call her his partner. Her name is Tanya Fulbright. She runs a computer business and a used record shop downtown. Those two businesses don't seem to connect, I said, puzzled. That's because they don't. One of the businesses pays the bills, and the other is more of a side project, he said. How do you know that? I asked, intrigued. Danny chuckled again. I don't want to spoil the surprise. You'll see when you meet her. She's a bit unique, but she's brilliant with computers. Hand her a cell phone and an iPod, and she could probably figure out just about anything. After we finished our coffee and chatted a little more, we each went back to our work. I decided to catch Chris Hayes during the afternoon shift change and ask him to have breakfast with me the next morning. Later that morning, I received a call on the intercom saying Bud wanted to see me. I walked into his office, expecting something unpleasant, and closed the door behind me. Bud was facing away from me, focused on his laptop at the big desk that seemed more for show than use. The desk created a divide between Bud's position of authority and the rest of the staff on the other side. He gestured for me to sit, which made it clear he saw me as part of the team. I sat there for almost 10 minutes while Bud continued to type away without saying a word. I couldn't take the silence anymore. I'm sorry, but did you need something? I have 3 warrants I'm trying to finish up this afternoon. Bud remained focused on his screen. Why did you upset Clarissa this past weekend? I wasn't trying to upset her. I had plans. If she felt bad about it, I guess that's on me. Bud kept typing. So you know why we're having this meeting. He seemed to want me to leave. I decided to play along and stayed seated for another 20 minutes until his phone rang. It sounded like Margaline. Without a word, Bud waved me away without turning around. This felt unproductive, and I could tell Bud knew he had wasted my time. I now had to cut into my lunch break to finish the warrants for the deputies to serve later that day. It would be hard to get the magistrate judge's signature until after lunch, so Bud's little game worked. At 2:45 that afternoon, Deputy Chris Hayes returned to his desk from patrol to prepare his report for the 3 o'clock shift change. Chris, got a minute? I asked. He looked a bit surprised. Yeah, Captain, he replied. What's up? He asked. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow morning. There are a few things to talk about, and I thought we could grab a late breakfast or something. Chris glanced around to see if any other deputies were paying attention. It seemed they weren't. Sure, I guess that works. What can I say? No? His sarcastic tone caught me off guard. Great, let's meet at the donut hole tomorrow at 8. Okay, Cap, Chris said, settling back into his chair. I'll be there. As I walked back to my office, I felt a bit confused. To be honest, I didn't know Chris very well personally. We had been working together for a couple of years, and my promotion from deputy to captain might have caused some awkwardness. We were also part of the Special Operations Group, and he did a great job during a recent rescue operation. Behind the jealousy, though, I couldn't quite understand why he sounded sarcastic and a bit defensive. The next morning, I arrived at the donut hole at 7:55 and noticed Chris was already at a booth sipping coffee. I took a seat, and the waitress handed me a menu and asked if I wanted coffee, which I accepted. I looked at the menu and asked, "Are you hungry?" Chris grunted and replied, "I guess a man's gotta eat." The waitress returned with my coffee and asked if we were ready to order. "Go ahead, Chris," I said. "You buying?" he questioned. "Sure. In that case, I'll order a big breakfast. I'll take the 3-egg omelet, hash browns, pancakes, bacon, a slice of ham, and a tall glass of orange juice." "And for you, hun?" the waitress asked. "I'll just have a Belgian waffle and some bacon. Should be about 15 minutes, she said as she took our menus and went back to the kitchen. "Well," Chris began, "you asked me to meet. What did you want to talk about? Is it about last week's standoff?" No, I replied. "It's more personal." Chris straightened up, curious. "Personal?" "Yeah," I said. "I need help with some computer stuff, and I was told you might know someone who could assist." "Why me?" he asked. "Well, I heard your partner knows a lot about computers and software." Chris sighed. "So you want me to ask my girlfriend and have her help you with whatever you need, is that right?" "Yeah, something like that." "So, you're asking for a favor. Am I correct?" I wasn't sure why he was sounding defensive. "Yes, I'm asking for your help too. And this isn't about the sheriff's department? No, not at all, I promise. Wow, he said, crossing his arms. You've got some guts, Captain. Now I felt a bit defensive. What do you mean by that? I mean, you're having a breakfast meeting on work time just to ask me for a personal favor. I thought this would be a good way for us to chat and get to know each other better since we will be working together in a different role. Come on, he replied, clearly annoyed. Whatever this favor is, you didn't want to ask me back at the station for a reason. Why should I help you at all, huh? Why? Well, I thought carefully, why not? What's wrong with asking? Can I speak my mind? He asked. Of course, I replied, narrowing my eyes. Let me tell you what's wrong with asking. I really struggle to help anyone who seems to be the favorite of Sheriff Bud Roberts. I can't do anything for Bud's chosen one. Wait a second, No, you wait, Chris interrupted. This shows that you clearly don't understand how things are changing in the department because of you. Do you honestly think anyone respects you? Do you believe anyone sees you as a leader? You walk into this department and get the best shift right away, just because of who you are. Everyone else has to work long hours on tough shifts, but you got special treatment. You work a couple of years and get promoted to captain and chief deputy? And you run the SOG team too? Come on, it's obvious that you get everything you want. You think this was just given to me? I had 10 years of service on the police force before I joined the sheriff's department. I've got degrees in criminal justice and psychology. I worked hard for this position, I replied, trying to defend myself. Oh, give me a break, Quinn. I also have 2 degrees in criminology and business. I've spent almost as much time in law enforcement as you, but I had to do my time working years on tough shifts before I could even hope to get a day position. But you? They just put you on the day shift without the usual steps. You went from being an officer to being part of the upper management so quickly. You don't even seem like one of us anymore. And you want me to do you a favor? Come on. I didn't know how to respond. I needed to step away. I'm going to take a break. Let's finish this talk when I come back. I got up and went to the restroom. I didn't really need to go, but I felt overwhelmed. I splashed cold water on my face and stared into the mirror. I thought about everything Chris had said, all the frustration he had held back. It seemed like many of the others felt the same way. But looking at myself in the mirror, one thought stood out. Chris was completely right. He just didn't understand why. The truth was that my whole career at the sheriff's department felt like a mask I was wearing. I was in a complicated situation, and I knew it all too well. I got my job because of personal connections, not because I earned it. I walked out of the restroom and sat back down across from Chris Hayes. I realized I had to tell him the truth if I wanted his help. It was time to stop hiding from the truth. To regain my self-respect, I had to trust Chris and be honest with him. You're right, I finally said. Excuse me? Chris looked surprised. I said you're right. Everything you said is correct. I don't get it. Are you trying to play a trick on me? Chris had a smug smile. No, Chris, I mean it. That's why I need your help. It was time for my confession. I took a deep breath. Bud Roberts has been involved with my wife for 2 years. That's why I got my job at the sheriff's department. There was a deal between Bud and my wife. We always wanted to move to the country, but I couldn't if I stayed with the Red River Falls Police Department. Bud found out and offered to bring me on to the sheriff's department, I explained while pouring more coffee. I figured out that Bud put me on the day shift to make it easier for him to see my wife when both of our spouses wouldn't be around, since they were home at night and on weekends. Chris took a deep breath as I shared more of my story. So, I continued, Bud arranged for me to be promoted to chief deputy, which makes my downfall more believable. Now I have a lot more responsibilities, so it will look strange when I go from being a hero to someone people start to question. Plus, as captain, I'm out of the police union, so I have no safety net there. What do you think he has planned? Chris asked, calmer now. I'm not sure. It probably involves some serious trouble for me once everything comes out. Wow, he said, shocked. How did you find out? The hard way. What, did you walk in on them? I might as well have, I said, taking a sip of coffee. I came home early from a conference in Minneapolis and caught them at my place. They were acting strangely, just standing in my kitchen and drinking coffee. A close friend of mine gave me a hint about something going on, but I didn't know the details until I found them together. Seriously? No idea at all? Well, I figured it out on the way home. Bud told me he had an emergency with the county supervisors and had to leave the conference early. Plus, he was a few days late getting there. It all clicked when I tried to call him to say I was going home. I couldn't reach him on his phone, so I called his house. His wife, Margaline, didn't know Bud had left Minneapolis or was on his way back to Red River Falls. What kind of husband wouldn't call his wife to let her know he was coming home? Did you tell her? No, I didn't. I didn't have the heart to break the news. I was too shocked by the realization while I was on the phone with her. Now, looking back, I wish I had told her. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Okay, listen, Chris said. I'm sorry about earlier. I had no idea. I don't want you to think the rest of us see you as less capable. You handled that situation with the little girl from the kidnapping very well, and last week's hostage situation was impressive. I just wanted you to see how it looks from the viewpoint of the other officers. I get it, I replied. I guess I was tricking myself into thinking my success was all about me, only to realize I'm like a puppet, with Bud Roberts pulling the strings. Our food finally arrived, and we waited until the waitress left before talking again. Look, Pat, Chris said, is it okay if I call you Pat? I nodded. I'm willing to talk to Tanya about helping you, but first, I need something from you. Go ahead. I need you to promise that you won't make any moves on my girlfriend once you meet her. Also, I want to know you'll support me if I ever need it, no questions asked. If you can promise me those two things, I'll make sure you get all the support you need from the other deputies and sergeants. You'll need to deal with the lieutenants by yourself. I leaned in closer across the table. Chris, if this all works out like I hope, I promise I will find a way to repay you. I always help those in need and never forget those who help me. Chris nodded. All right then. After I finish my free breakfast and you're done eating, we'll go for a ride. Sound good? Sounds great. I just want a fair chance. We finished eating about 20 minutes later. I paid the bill and followed Chris outside to where our cars were parked. Before we go, Chris said, we have something to do. Open your trunk. I did what he said and popped the trunk of my Ford sedan. Chris reached in and moved my gear bags aside. He lifted the spare tire from its spot and took out a small object. I was surprised and had no clue it was there. It was about the size of an egg and seemed connected to the car. What is that? I asked, feeling confused. GPS locator. Have you noticed that Bud always seems to know where you are or where you've been? He said. I can't believe it, I whispered. So Bud could track his deputies all the time. I wonder why he didn't know I was driving back from Minneapolis that night. Maybe he was busy with other things, Chris replied. His straightforward answer surprised me. Sorry if I'm being blunt. Anyway, hop in my cruiser. It will look less unusual to Bud if he sees my car where we're going. I got into his car and we drove for about 2 miles until we reached the north side of downtown Red River Falls. The area looked run down, with several pawn shops and a couple of other shabby stores. There were also several empty storefronts and a small, drab diner that looked like it wouldn't serve good food. A bookstore stood on the corner, and even at this early hour there were still people going in and out since it was open 24 hours. Next to the bookstore was a large old building that used to be a drugstore. It was wider than any of the other shops on the block. I followed Chris inside, and a little brass bell rang as we entered. The first thing I noticed was the strong security, cameras and heavy bars on the windows. One side of the shop was filled with laptops and desktops, some being repaired or put together. Others were for sale behind locked glass cases. The other half had rows of vinyl records, some still wrapped in plastic. There were also used CDs, DVDs, old cassette tapes, and even some 8-track tapes. Posters of bands, movies, and pop culture covered the walls. I saw posters of Jimi Hendrix, the Grateful Dead, and Pink Floyd, all of which seemed out of place in this shop. As I took a deep breath, I caught the scent of something unusual in the air. I wasn't sure where the smell was coming from, whether it was from someone in the store or if someone had been smoking inside. Chris noticed my sniffing and said, Yes, it's marijuana, and remember you promised me something. It's fine, I replied, raising my hands to show I was okay. Is Tanya here? Chris asked one of the store workers. The young woman wore all black shoes, tight pants, and a t-shirt with a famous band logo. Yes, she's in the back, the girl replied, chewing gum. I followed Chris through some heavy black curtains to a well-equipped workshop filled with tools for fixing computers. "Hey there! What brings you here?" said a tall woman with bright black hair and pale skin. She also wore dark makeup and looked very stylish in all black, covered in tattoos and piercings. "I came to see you," Chris responded, and they shared a friendly hug. Though I wasn't a fan of the style, I had to admit she carried it well. "Actually," Chris continued as he pulled back, "I'm kind of here for work." "Oh, really?" she said, looking surprised as her eyes shifted to my badge. "Yes, but you don't need to worry. It's not what you think." "Good to hear. So, who is your friend?" she asked, glancing at me. "This is one of my bosses. Meet Chief Deputy Captain Pat Quinn. Pat, this is Tanya." "Nice to meet you," Tanya said, shaking my hand. "Thanks. It's not every day someone says that to me," I replied with a smile. "Pat has something important to talk about." "Sure, let's go to my office," Tanya said. We walked through the store into a spacious garage. Tanya opened a refrigerator and revealed some tightly wrapped packages inside. She took out a rolled cigarette and lit it, then opened a garage door a little to let in some fresh winter air. I could hardly believe what was happening in front of me. "Remember," Chris said, "you promised." I gave a small gesture with my hand and smiled at Tanya. "So, what's going on, Pat?" I started from the beginning and told her everything. I thought sharing my whole story might help her understand how to catch Clarissa and Bud. I needed something solid that would help me deal with both their situation and perhaps Bud's job, too. "Wow, Pat," Tanya replied when I was done. "That sounds really difficult. I can't believe your own wife and boss would act like that. I thought Bud was just making things hard for Chris all this time because of me. Seems like he's not the only issue." "What do you think you can do to help me?" I asked. "How do they communicate? Is it mostly phone calls, texts, or emails?" "I'm not totally sure. From what my son Nick has mentioned, it seems she's on the computer a lot while I'm away. And I know that Bud spends quite a bit of time on his computer at work when he's actually there." "Got it," she said. "We should probably start by putting a keylogger on your computer." "What's a keylogger?" A keylogger is a program that tracks the keys you press in order. It can help you find passwords for her email, social media, or any site you need. Does she have a smartphone? "Yes." "What kind? An iPhone or Android?" she asked, taking a deep breath. "Android. I got her a new Samsung a few months ago." "Great. I can help with that so you can see all of her messages. I can even install a hidden app to send everything to your email." "What about the emails?" I asked. "You can forward those to your own account. Just remember to delete them from the sent box afterward. Otherwise, she'll see what you sent and who it went to." "Psh," I said. "She feels so secure right now, along with Bud, that I doubt she'll even check. They both think they have me and the world right where they want us." "Quick question," Tanya said, taking another deep breath. "Do you know where Bud is texting and emailing your wife from?" "What do you mean? Like, from which computer or place?" "Both, actually," she replied after exhaling. "Do you know if he's contacting her from work?" "Oh, I get it. If he's smart, he's probably emailing her from home and texting from his personal phone. You'd expect that. If he's using a work device for personal stuff, there could be trouble." "Exactly," she said. "Every city organization has strict rules about internet, email, and phone use. So knowing that, are you open to considering something that might bend the rules a little?" I couldn't help but smile. "That depends on what you mean," I replied, curious. "What if I could make sure you'd never get in trouble for it?" Now I was really paying attention. "Is she really that good?" I asked Chris. "Yeah, she went to MIT for computer engineering. She definitely knows her stuff." "Actually," Tanya corrected, "I dropped out after my 3rd year. I just got bored with school. But anyway, are you interested?" "Go on," I invited. "What if I could make every email or text message Bud ever sent to your wife look like it was sent from his work account or his work phone?" "What? How could you do that?" "Easy, at least for me. Do you have any emails or texts he sent you?" "Yeah, he sends general emails all the time. If you want, I can modify those emails to show the details of Bud's computer and email address. I can even send them through the same city network to make it look like he originally sent them that way. It's a bit different with texts, but it works on the same idea. No one will know the difference." I let out a long whistle. "And you can really do that?" You can make it look like those emails and texts were genuinely from Bud? I can definitely do that. I can help make Bud look like he got caught in an embarrassing situation. It didn't take me long to decide. Let's do it. Consider it done, she said with a smile. Tanya stamped out the rest of what she was using and tossed it into the stove. Then she started chatting with Chris, and I found it hard to look away. You look really good in your uniform. I can't wait to see what else you can do tonight. They continued to exchange warm words, and I found myself watching, intrigued. After a moment, Tanya said, could you give us a minute, Patrick? I need some time alone with Chris. I was a bit surprised until Chris said, Hey, Pat, I really need you to step out for a bit. Pat? Huh? Oh, right, yeah. I slowly turned and headed back to the front of the building, spending some time looking through some old vinyl records. To her credit, Tanya had managed to gather a great collection of music from every genre. All the albums and records were in great shape. I was distracted when one of the store employees, a friendly goth woman, came up to me. Are you a cop? Actually, I'm a deputy sheriff with the Mason County Sheriff's Department. Is everything okay? She asked, chewing her gum. Yes, everything's fine as far as I know. Is Tanya okay? Yes, Tanya's fine too. Good. My parole officer would be upset if I lost another job. I couldn't help but laugh as she walked away to organize more records and CDs. Soon, Chris Hayes returned looking flustered and a bit out of breath. His hair was a mess. Wow, I said as we left the store. Was it good for you too? I joked. Pat, let me ask you something. Have you ever had an experience that was so amazing that you just felt it long after? I was surprised. No, I can't say that I have. Yeah, he said as he put on his hat. It was unforgettable. Here, Tanya wrote some instructions for you for next time. She also gave you these. He handed me a regular USB thumb drive and another small drive with a phone USB adapter. The regular one is for your home computer. It has special software on it. The other one is for you to download onto your wife's phone when she isn't around. Just plug them in, and you'll find out everything you need to know. Thanks, Chris, I said. I won't forget this. If it all goes well, I will make it up to you somehow. I know you will, Pat. Thanks again for breakfast. We got back into Chris's cruiser and headed back to the diner for my car. As we left the store, I saw Tanya at the door. She waved goodbye as I drove off. Chris was a lucky guy. When I got back to the office, I felt my phone buzzing in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a text message from Shannon. Hey, Patrick. Just wanted to say hello, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. Please be safe and know I'm thinking of you. Shannon. Wow. No text had ever made my heart race like this one. It was simple and sweet, just like Shannon. She just wanted me to know she cared. Suddenly, the heavy feeling I had when I walked into the office lifted. With the information I hoped to gather on Clarissa and Bud soon, along with my new connection with Shannon, everything felt brighter. I wasn't even worried when I asked Karen if Bud was in his office. No, he's gone to lunch now and won't be back for the rest of the day. I had a feeling I knew where Bud was right now, and I was pretty sure Bud knew where I was too, thanks to the GPS. I finished my work right at 4 o'clock and drove straight home. The boys were outside playing in the snow and were excited to see me when I parked in the driveway. For the next hour, we had a great time playing in the snow fort they made and enjoyed a lively snowball fight. By the time we came in for dinner, we were all soaked from the snow. Clarissa had a small fit and told us we needed to change before dinner. Luckily, I still had some clothes in my old bedroom closet that I could change into. I got ready for dinner. Clarissa made meatballs for dinner, which is always a family favorite. Afterward, I offered to help clear the table and clean the dishes, and she happily accepted. I'm going to take a relaxing bath, she said. The last I saw of her that evening, she went into the bathroom with her iPod. I sneaked up the stairs and peeked into our bedroom. To my surprise, she hadn't taken her phone with her. I quickly grabbed the external drive and plugged in the USB cable. Soon, Clarissa's phone came to life and I saw the app downloading. Moments later, my phone buzzed, showing me a text with Clarissa's username and password for her phone. How could Tanya do that? I wasn't sure if it was legal, but I didn't mind. The app finished loading, so I unplugged the USB cable and put her phone back where I found it. I did the same on our family computer, setting up a program to track her key presses. I would have to wait until she logged into the computer, but when she did, I would be able to see her email, Facebook, and anything important. When I was done, I closed the computer and returned to the family room to play video games with the boys. While looking at the Christmas tree in the corner, I realized Christmas was only a few days away, and I needed to get some gifts for the boys. Clarissa still wasn't out of the bathroom by the time I tucked the boys into bed. I decided it was best to leave and avoid another disagreement with her. But before I left, I made sure to take all my old work uniforms from the closet and brought them with me to the motel. The next day, I called work and told Karen Landingham I would be taking some time off in the morning. I decided to drive downtown to the local Army-Navy surplus store. I looked around until I found what I wanted. I bought several sets and returned to my motel room. I laid out a clean uniform shirt and pants. I took out some U.S. Army captain's rank insignia I bought at a surplus store. I pinned a set of 2 silver bars on the left collar of my shirt and a silver pin for the Mason County Sheriff's Department on the right. Next, I attached the captain's rank insignia on the shoulders of my shirt. I finished by putting on my old equipment belt, which had a taser in my sidearm. For the first time in a while, I felt like a real law enforcement officer again. When I walked into work after lunch, many people noticed me. Chris Hayes was busy at his desk with paperwork. He looked up and nodded with a smile as I passed by. I had just sat down when my desk phone rang. Karen Landingham told me that Bud wanted to see me. It seemed like the old boss was actually at his office. "What's with the uniform?" he asked. "I'm a deputy, chief deputy to be exact. I'm wearing what represents my position," I replied. "I don't remember giving any approval for that uniform," he said. "And I don't recall you approving any uniform for this role either," I responded calmly. Bud walked over from behind his desk and laughed lightly. "I see what you're doing. You want to separate yourself from me and win back the respect of the other deputies, right? Sorry, Patrick. It's not that easy." "My values haven't changed, Bud. This is who I am, and I want to represent my position this way. Go ahead, Patrick. Keep testing my authority. You just make me feel a bit less guilty every time you do," he replied with a smirk. "Interesting, Bud. I didn't think you were capable of feeling guilty," I said before turning away, determined not to let Bud ruin my day. Just then, I received a text from Shannon. "Happy Tuesday! Just wanted to let you know you're thought of today. Be safe, Shannon." I replied, "Your support means so much to me. Your words lift my spirits when I'm feeling down. Patrick." Looking up from my phone, I saw Bud glaring at me from his office door. I smiled and raised my phone for him to see. He rushed into my office and wanted to know what had me in a good mood. "I've decided not to let you and Clarissa bother me anymore, Bud. You can only affect me if I let you, and I won't," I said confidently. "Oh, really?" he chuckled. "And how do you plan to do that?" "I have my ways, Bud. Plus, I have someone supportive who gives me the strength to handle this," I replied. "I'm not giving up easily." "You will, Patrick. Clarissa is with me now. You need to get used to that." "Maybe I'm not just talking about Clarissa, Bud. Maybe I've accepted that she and I are in the past. But just because I've accepted that doesn't mean I'm okay with you and Clarissa just moving on together, Bud. You need to stop leading her on, Patrick. This act of pretending you are handling your responsibilities at home has to stop. I've tried to be patient, but I'm running out of it. Remember this, Patrick. What I choose to do is going to happen. I have many ways to tear down your careful setup. I haven't even started yet." "Well," I replied, "thankfully I have started to make some changes, Bud. It's like peeling an onion, one layer at a time. It might take time, but I will reach the heart of it all. And at the heart is the truth. I want everyone to know the truth. About me, about you, about everything." Bud stood up looking even more serious. "Don't make me take steps, Patrick. I can really impact your life in ways you might not expect. Think about your kids and how they will see you. They look up to you now. But if you keep upsetting me and Clarissa, I can make them feel so ashamed that they won't want to show their faces anywhere. They will dread going to school." I stood up from behind my desk. "And you, Bud, need to think about how far you can push me and whether it's wise to threaten me about my children. You told me to accept what's going to happen. I'm telling you, Bud, to consider the unexpected. You never know how someone backed into a corner will respond, and surprises can always come." Bud turned to leave my office. "This all ends, Patrick. The situation with Clarissa. Everything stops now. Prepare your boys for the changes, because if you don't, I will. I wanted to say something more before he walked out, but I noticed others were watching us. The tension was heavy, and I could see people were curious about what was happening. I didn't think much about it as I went home that afternoon, but judging from the surprised look on Clarissa's face, it was clear she had talked to Bud. She told me she didn't have dinner ready and needed to go to the store for some things. I told her that was okay and that I could manage with the boys while she was out. As she drove away, I quickly logged onto our home computer. I set up the keylogger system, and before long, I got her email username and password. I also accessed her Facebook and Snapchat accounts, which I had heard of but didn't know much about. Soon, I was looking through months and even years of emails between Clarissa and Bud. I quickly clicked on them, sending copies to my own email. Then, following Tanya's advice, I deleted my activity by clearing out the Sent folder in her account. There were so many emails that I felt lost. There might have been over 600 emails from the past 2 years. When I checked my email, I found a huge number of text messages that Tanya's system had forwarded to me. I was surprised she could do that, but she was very clever. There were more than 11,000 text messages from the last 2 years. At first, the texts seemed harmless, but I noticed they became more personal over time. It sounded like they were thinking about meeting in real life. About a month after they started texting, it seemed they might have. I began to wonder when Clarissa received her low T treatment from her doctor and how long she had kept that information to herself. The emails didn't provide as much proof as I had hoped. Most of them were pretty ordinary. There were some flirty messages, but not enough to be clear proof. The most noteworthy emails were between Clarissa's email and Bud's personal account, not his work email. But Tanya assured me she had a solution for that. So I saved and forwarded those emails to myself. Most of their communication was through texts. I stayed up the entire night reading them. I skipped many texts from the first year and focused on the last 6 months, right before a serious incident I had faced. Bud seemed to be plotting something against me. I had guessed correctly. Time suggested he meant for me to be in trouble. The next morning, I called in sick to work and decided to stay at the hotel, going through as many texts and emails as I could. It was hard to read about my wife's messages with my boss, but I was determined to find a way to handle the situation. One text caught my attention. Bud told Clarissa he had all the evidence he needed, using quotation marks to emphasize it. Clarissa asked what he meant, and Bud explained a bit more. He told Clarissa that he had a winner in Jeff, and that I would never see the irony in it. He also mentioned something about having proof that would keep me from challenging him in this whole situation. Winner. Proof. The only person he could be talking about was Jeff McCauley. Jeff McCauley worked at Mason County Jail and managed our property and evidence room. I thought it would be smart to look into this and see what I could find. If I was right, then Bud's hints weren't as clever as he thought. I quickly called Tanya Fulbright to ask for another favor. She answered right away. "Hey, what's up? I didn't expect to hear from you so soon," she said. Talking to her felt like catching up with an old friend. "I hope I'm not bothering you. You've helped me a lot already, and I don't want to ask for too much." "Oh, Patrick, you're not bothering me at all. I always have time for one of Christopher's nice coworkers." I was surprised and didn't know what to say. I would need to ask her about that comment later. "Well, Tanya, I was wondering if you could help me do a background check on someone." "Patrick Quinn," she teased. "I just helped you with software for your wife's phone and computer to access information about her and her associate who is a public official. A background check is easy for me." Yes. When you say it like that, I guess I'm underestimating you." "Yes, you are, but since you're so likable, I might let it go this time. There could be a little payback in the future, though." I was curious. "What kind of payback?" "You might have to work for it later," she joked, knowing her words would have some effect. "Well, we can sort out a deal later, but for now, I need some important details about a key person at the Mason County Sheriff's Department." "Ooh, that sounds interesting. Who is it, Patrick?" "His name is Jeff McCauley. He's a jailer and also runs our property and evidence room." "Okay, give me a second." I could hear her typing away. "All right, I found him. What do you have?" "I have one, Jeffrey Malcolm McCauley, born on June 27th, 73. He lives at 834 Lincoln Street. He has a wife named Marissa and 2 kids, Cicely and Tyson, who are 16 and 13. His wife works at Wells Fargo Bank as a teller. The only issues on record are a couple of old traffic tickets. Nothing else stands out on the criminal side. Darn. A dead end. I had a gut feeling that Bud had some kind of hold over Jeff to make him cooperate. Jeff had to be connected to Bud in some way, but if it wasn't something illegal, then what could it be? Financial troubles, maybe? Hey, Tanya, can you check into Jeff's finances? See what you can find? Patrick, are you serious? Do you really doubt my skills? Tanya teased. Now I'll have to think of something special to show you what I can do. Just work your magic, Tanya. I really need a breakthrough here. I know, Patrick. You know I'm always ready to help, she said with a chuckle. She was unstoppable, and I really appreciated her persistence. Okay, I'm on it. Hold on. Wow. I sat up in bed. What? Wow. What did you find? Jeff and his wife have a mortgage on their house for about $55,000, which is pretty typical for where they live, but Jeff has 2 credit cards in his name that are completely maxed out. How much is on those cards? Unbelievable, she said. One card is maxed out at $60,000, and the other has another $35,000 on it. I whistled slowly. Can you look deeper and figure out where all that money is going? Give me a moment. I need to check the MasterCard records. I didn't even want to know if what she was doing was entirely above board. After about 30 seconds, she asked, Do you know where Canterbury Park is? I thought for a minute. Canterbury Park? I think it's a horse racing track near Valley Fair Amusement Park, on the south side of the Twin Cities. Yep, that's it, Tanya confirmed. I'm looking at it online right now. It seems like Jeff has a serious gambling problem because both of his credit cards are maxed out from cash advances at Canterbury Park. That was it. Bud Roberts had Jeff McCauley in a tough spot. Even the hint of something that could be used to influence Jeff would be enough to get him removed from his position as property and evidence supervisor. All someone had to do was know about his situation, and they could easily pressure him into doing whatever they wanted, considering he was nearly $100,000 in debt from gambling. Bud Roberts should have taken him out of the job as soon as he found out. The fact that Jeff was still in that position meant Bud was definitely using him. Tanya, you are absolutely amazing. I promise I'll make it up to you and Chris. You haven't promised me anything, Patrick, Tanya said playfully, but I can think of plenty of ways you can make it up to me. I said, feeling awkward. I'm not sure Chris would be okay with that. Chris and I have a very open understanding, Patrick. We just have to agree on who we involve and be completely honest with each other. I think spending some time together, the 3 of us, could be good for all of us. Just think about it, Patrick, and keep an open mind. I'm just saying, I replied. I'll take care of that, Tanya, I laughed. Thanks again for all your help. Goodbye, she said before hanging up. It was time to visit Jeff McCauley at the Property and Evidence Office. I felt much better for the rest of the afternoon and showed up for work bright and early the next morning. Luckily, Bud Roberts only had 2 meetings planned for that morning and intended to be out of the office for the rest of the day. Just a typical Friday. While I was preparing 2 civil warrants to be delivered later, I looked up from my desk around 10:30 and saw Bud Roberts leaving quickly while talking on his phone. He glanced at me, smiled, and made a gesture before the elevator doors closed. I figured that was my clue about where he was going. After he left, I decided to stop by the Property and Evidence room. Jeff McCauley was about 5'6" inches and weighed around 180 pounds. He had a comb-over to hide a bald spot and a large mustache. Although he never became a deputy, most people in the department generally liked him. "Good morning, Jeff," I said casually when I arrived. "Captain," he said, looking a bit surprised. "What brings you down to P&E today?" "I'm still adjusting to my new role as chief deputy. One of my duties is to oversee property and evidence, so I thought it was a good time to check the property and evidence logs to see how they're managed and whether they're up to date. I brought the property and evidence guidelines with me, and I thought we could review them together." Jeff's face changed, and he seemed a bit uneasy. "I've been working here for 5 years, Captain. Everything is in order. Bud has never had a complaint about my work." "I'm sure that's true, but I want to review the logs and take my own inventory to ensure that what we have matches the records. I hope you understand." I noticed Jeff shifting his weight, and his right hand was shaking a little. He seemed to be breathing faster. Well, Captain, the logs and inventory are all computerized now. I just finished the last weekly inventory this morning. I can show you the results right away. That sounds great. Go ahead and print it out, and we can check the arms room and evidence room ourselves. Jeff stood still, looking worried. Is something wrong, Jeff? Well, Captain, I finished the inventory and I was planning to leave early today. That's interesting, I replied, pretending to be confused. You know that requests for time off come through my office. I didn't see any request from you this week. Remember, they need to be approved a day in advance. Jeff looked away from me, breathing quickly. I decided to push a bit further. How about this, Jeff? Let's quickly finish the inventory and then I'll let you take the rest of the day off. How does that sound? He didn't answer, just stood there, unsure. I stepped closer and looked him directly in the eyes. I could see his lip trembling a bit. I know, Jeff, I said softly. I know you're having some financial issues. I'm aware that you owe more on your credit cards than your house. You spend most weekends in Minneapolis, and I know things have been tough. I get that you might be at risk of losing your job, your family, and your home. And I'm aware that Bud Roberts knows this too, and may be trying to use it against you. Jeff suddenly dropped into his chair, hiding his face in his hands. I can help you, Jeff, I said, pulling up a chair. But you need to help me too. Start by telling me what Bud wants you to do for him. No secrets. I need you to be honest if you want my help. It took Jeff a while to gather himself. When he felt ready, he spoke. Captain, he began. Call me Pat, I replied. Okay, Pat, he continued. You say you'll help me. I need to know you mean it. Promise me you will help me with everything. I leaned closer and placed my hand on his shoulder. Jeff, look at me. He did. You have my word. I'll do what I can to help you. Will you help me stay out of trouble? What had Bud gotten him into? Jeff, I don't know everything you and Bud are involved in, but I promise to do my best to keep you safe. I can't promise you won't face trouble, only that I will try to help you stay clear of it. Jeff wiped his eyes and nodded. Okay, Pat, I guess we should go. I'm going to bring a few people with me just to be safe. That sounds like a good idea, Pat. I called in Danny Larson, Chris Hayes, another deputy named Angel Ryerson, and one of our lieutenants, Benito Ben Villanueva. I didn't know most of our lieutenants very well, but I knew Ben better than the others. I wasn't sure how he felt about me being captain since I had been chosen instead of him, even though he never applied for the role. But I had to take a chance. Ben was one of the most liked and trusted members of our department. He always acted professionally and was a great officer and fair supervisor. I needed to believe he would set aside any personal feelings and focus on what we needed to do. Jeff had told me that what Bud was making him do would really surprise me once I found out. I thought it would be best to have some extra people with me for this. I asked everyone to meet me at 4 p.m., just after the afternoon shift ended. I made sure to keep an eye on Jeff McCauley all day after our morning meeting. I drove us back to the Skyline Driver Motel to get my truck. I knew that Bud was not tracking my personal vehicle. Then I told everyone else to follow me in their own cars after Chris Hayes and I checked that no one had GPS devices on their vehicles. Danny, Angel, and Ben looked at us like we were being too careful, but they went along with it. Next, I asked everyone to take out their personal and work phones and remove the batteries so they couldn't be tracked. They grumbled a bit, but they did it. Jeff and I hopped into my truck, and Ben, Angel, Danny, and Chris got into Ben's Chevy Silverado. We drove to the northwest area of Red River Falls, near the new industrial park. Jeff had me stop at a set of storage sheds at Red River Rentals. We all got out and walked to Unit Hash 189. Jeff pulled out a key for the lock on the roll-up door. Just remember what you promised me, Pat, Jeff said, and that this isn't my fault. Open the unit, Jeff, I told him. He unlocked the padlock and opened the door. He turned on a light, and what I saw inside took me by surprise. There were storage shelves along one wall of the shed. On those shelves were many white paper bags and boxes, all sealed with red tape. A quick look showed me over 80 bags and boxes filled with evidence. Oh my God, I said, shocked. Jeff, what have you done? What is this? Angel asked, her voice filled with shock. Is that what I think it is, Pat? Danny said, looking confused. This can't be real, Ben whispered. We all entered the shed together, staring in disbelief at the items that had been secretly taken from our evidence lockers and moved to a storage place in a rough part of town. The boxes held clothing, tools linked to crimes, and other significant items from over 80 cases. Some were from current investigations, while others dated back 10 years. Danny stood frozen, shaking his head. "Jeff, what have you done?" I just gazed at the wall of evidence, feeling like everything was falling apart, one box at a time. I felt an urge to scream, so I did. "Why, Jeff? Why?" "Pat, Do not speak right now, Jeff." Macaulay glared, his head down. "Pat, do you understand what this means?" Angel said, her voice anxious. "Bud put me in a tough spot, Pat," Jeff started. "I said, be quiet, Jeff. Do you see that wall? Do you know what this is? Years' worth of evidence was taken from a secure room and moved without permission. This is called evidence tampering. Over 80 cases are on those shelves, Jeff. Do you know what that means? It means serious problems for these cases. Dangerous people could go free because of this, and it could mean a heavy sentence for you." Jeff lowered his head, mumbling, 800. "Yes, 800 years, Jeff. That's how long I could end up in jail. It's almost a life sentence." I started walking back and forth, feeling trapped and anxious while the others stared at the wall in disbelief. "How did you get all this here?" Chris asked. "My personal vehicle," Jeff replied softly. "How did you sign it out?" Angel pressed. "Bud used Patrick's signature online. He got it somehow from our IT guy, Dean Strobe. Bud signed it out and made me bring it here." "Pat, can I talk to you alone?" Ben Villanueva asked. He was always the calm voice in the group. We stepped outside into the cold air. "Pat, you've got a real problem in there. Can you explain what's going on?" "Ben, you might not believe me. Try me." I realized he was right. I needed to share the truth about what our boss was trying to do. Ben and I headed back into the shed, and I gathered everyone around. For the next 15 minutes, I explained everything that had happened and led up to this moment. I took a few moments to talk about Jeff Macaulay's part in all this, which made him quite uncomfortable. Ben, Angel, Chris, and Danny were stunned. They knew that Bud Roberts had a lot of personality and a bit of an ego. Up to this point, they had liked him and enjoyed working under him. Now, they saw how untrustworthy he really was. "What do we do now?" Angel asked. "Simple," I said. "We need to put the evidence back right away." "Not so fast, my friend," Ben replied. "I'm pretty sure it took weeks for Jeff and Bud to move all this evidence out here. There are a lot of investigations happening right now. This process could lead to new trials and make things look bad for the whole department and the Bureau of Criminal Investigations. We can't just keep this quiet, Pat. Or can we?" I glanced at Chris Hayes. He was thinking the same thing I was and commented, "It's easy. Tanya could help fix this situation and restore the records to how they were before the evidence was moved." He quickly explained to everyone how good Tanya was at her job and how quickly she could handle this. A quick phone call from Chris to Tanya sealed the agreement, and she was ready to meet us at the sheriff's office once we had everything brought back. Ben, Angel, and Danny urged me to just report everything to the Bureau of Criminal Investigations. I insisted they go along with my plan to return all the evidence to the sheriff's office tonight, clean up the records, and keep everything secure. I promised them, along with Chris Hayes, that Tanya was great at her work and could help return the records to their original state as long as there were no hard copies around. Jeff Macaulay assured us there weren't any, since the whole system was now digital. That's how Bud managed to take my electronic signature without anyone noticing. After some hesitation, they all agreed. It was getting dark, and we would have the cover of night to help with our task. Before we proceeded, Jeff reminded me about our agreement. "You promised you'd help me, Pat." "I'll do my best, Jeff, but you cannot manage the evidence room anymore." "But Pat, no buts, Jeff. It's not negotiable. I'll help you keep your job and find support for your gambling issue, but you won't be in charge of the property and evidence area again. I'll speak to Bryce Evans and make sure you return to the jail full-time soon. But all your passwords and access to the armory and evidence rooms will be taken away. You won't be able to go to any of those areas without me or another deputy present. The only thing you'll be able to do on your computer from now is play solitaire." Jeff was about to say something, but a serious look from Ben stopped him. He felt lucky to still have his job and not be in more trouble. Tanya met us at the sheriff's office and started working on the electronic records right away. By the time we finished loading all the evidence into my truck and brought it back, it was well past 8 p.m. Jeff was careful to put everything back in its proper place in the evidence room. By midnight, Tanya had completed reversing all the electronic transactions and even managed to access Bud Roberts' email to remove the copies of the transactions Jeff had sent him. There was no longer any electronic record of Bud Roberts' attempt to frame me. "Thank you so much, everyone," I said to the group, especially to Chris and Tanya. "This is the second time you both have helped me. I don't know how I can repay you, but I promise I won't forget this." Ben, Angel, and Danny all shook hands with me before leaving, but I could tell they were very uneasy about keeping such a big secret. I promised them that if it ever became known, I would take full responsibility. As far as I was concerned, this was just between me, Bud, and Jeff. I even warned Jeff not to tell anyone. "Chris? Tanya? Can I talk to you for a minute before you go?" "Of course," Tanya replied. "What's up?" "I hate to bother you since you've already done so much for me, but I was hoping to ask for one more favor." "What do you need?" Chris asked. "Something similar to before. This time, I need a backup plan in case Bud Roberts tries to cause trouble. I don't want to be left without options when things get tough, if you know what I mean." "I think I understand. You believe there are more people involved in this than just Bud Roberts," Chris said. "Oh, I'm sure there are. I just need to find a way to get some support from someone else instead of Bud. How good are you at checking someone's personal computers if I give you the IP addresses?" "I could do it easily, Sean Patrick Quinn, Jr., Tanya said with a smile. "Who are we investigating, Mr. Bond?" Both of them looked surprised when I told them, but they were ready to help me succeed. I was the last one from our group to leave the sheriff's office that night. As I returned to my F-150, I changed the battery in my phone, turned it on, and noticed a text message that had come in a few hours earlier. "Bridget and I are free this weekend. Any chance we might get to see you?" I felt a wave of happiness wash over me, making the frustration of the past hours disappear. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning, but I quickly typed back, "My boys and I are planning a day at the sledding hill. I think it's time we took Bridget out to try the new toboggan." I thought I would hear back from her in the morning, but my phone buzzed as I was leaving the parking lot. I stopped to read her message. "OMG, she will be so happy. I'm coming too. Mom and Dad will probably come to take pictures. Can't wait to meet your boys." I felt a bit unsure about introducing my boys to Shannon, but I realized they would probably meet her eventually if things kept going well. A smile crossed my face as I typed back, "It's a date." Her reply was simply, 3 inches. Once again, I woke up early and headed to get Nick and Jake to take them to the sledding hill. We had gotten a good amount of snow earlier in the week, so I expected it to be busy. Just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed again. I looked and saw it was Bud Roberts. I silenced the call while the boys loaded their sleds into the truck, and I followed behind them. I was too excited to see Shannon and Bridget, so I didn't mind Clarissa's remarks as I walked out the door. "It would be nice, Patrick, if you thought about others sometimes," she said. "You might regret this." "Big time. Oh, just get over it," I replied. "Maybe you and Bud aren't in control like you think. When you have little left, you don't have much to lose. You might want to think about how risky that is for you. Come on, Patrick. If you really had a way out, you would have taken it by now. You're just all talk. I should have made different choices long ago." Then she slammed the door behind me. Luckily, neither boy heard our conversation, and I managed to keep my thoughts to myself. Nothing was going to spoil my day. We reached the sledding hill around 9. Shannon and Bridget were already there waiting for us. Bridget ran up to me, and I picked her up for a warm hug. My boys looked a bit puzzled at my affection for her, but I quickly explained who she was and why she was important to me. Shannon admired my boys and couldn't stop talking about how handsome they were. The boys both turned red, but enjoyed the compliments. Nick and Jake quickly accepted Bridget into their fun group and took turns sliding down the big hill while helping her walk back up. Shannon and I stood at the top, sipping hot cocoa from a little snack stand that was open only on weekends. "I wasn't just being nice, Patrick," Shannon said. "Your boys are very good-looking. They really look like you." I moved a little closer to her, holding her gloved hand for a moment. "Thank you. That means a lot to me. You can't imagine how much I've been looking forward to seeing you again." "I was hoping so, Patrick. But you look worn out and stressed. Is everything all right?" No, I replied, looking down. It's been a really tough 48 hours for me. Tell me about it, she said. I'm a nurse, so I'm here to listen, she added with a smile. We sat on a park bench where we could still see the kids. The boys were doing great at playing with and taking care of Bridget. After a few moments, I shared my story with her. I talked about Jeff McCauley, his troubles at work and home, his gambling problems, and how Bud Roberts was trying to make my life difficult. You wouldn't believe it, Shannon. I can't believe he would go that far. It's bad enough he wants to take everything from me. But prison? He was trying to make sure I would spend a long time there. My goodness, Patrick, is there anything you can do? You have the evidence, right? Can't you just tell the state police and have him charged? I explained to Shannon how that would bring all the related cases into question. Some really bad people could end up being set free because of it. Every piece of evidence that was taken from our office linked back to cases I had worked on from my time at the Red River Falls Police Department to my more recent time at the Mason County Sheriff's Department. The State Attorney General and his team would likely review everything we had in evidence, which could lead to retrials for over 2,000 cases from the last 10 years when Jeff was in charge. But you know what the hardest part is, Shannon? Could it really get any worse, Patrick? Oh, yes. The hardest part is that Bud would have changed how my sons see me for the rest of their lives. They would have grown up thinking I was a criminal, and nothing I could say would change that. Any advice from a father like me would have felt hollow and meaningless. If the boys grew into good men, it wouldn't have been because of me. And if they faced challenges in life, it would have been my fault. Maybe it would have been better if I had disappeared altogether. Shannon leaned on my arm and rested her head on my shoulder. Not while I'm here, Patrick. I promise I won't let that happen. I was about to move a bit closer when I saw Nick, Jake, and Bridget standing on the top of the hill, looking our way, ready for another run. I'm just cold, Shannon said. I hope it's okay that I'm hugging your dad. He's nice and warm. The boys smiled shyly while Bridget giggled. In a second, they dashed down the hill again. I took the moment to say, that was smooth. At that point, Shannon's parents arrived at the bench where we were sitting, cameras ready to capture pictures of Bridget sledding. Shannon stood and hugged her mom, then her dad. I also stood and greeted both parents. Suzanne shook my hand warmly. Jack shook my hand firmly but looked at me strangely, almost like he was studying me. I wondered if he recalled our earlier moment. For the next hour, he didn't talk much. The most he did was nod when our eyes met. He turned his attention back to his granddaughter as she sledded with the boys. Suzanne and Shannon sat between Jack and me. The two women chatted enough for all of us. Suzanne complimented me on my boys, and I thanked her. Eventually, I excused myself to join my boys and Bridget for some sledding. Bridget was thrilled and insisted I ride with her. The boys preferred to go alone and were getting too big for two riders on one sled. I really enjoyed sledding with Bridget. Shannon and her mom watched, smiling happily. Jack, however, stayed quiet. I sensed that, in time, he might want to have a serious chat. I wondered how much he knew about my life. Maybe he didn't care. Still, I hoped he would see things from my side. I just didn't want him to take anything out on Shannon. He didn't seem like the sort to do that, but you could never be sure. After all, Shannon was his only child, and he cherished her and Bridget. We wrapped up our sledding fun around 12:30 when the kids started saying they were hungry. I was feeling hungry too, and the boys asked me to take them out for lunch. Bridget quickly said where she wanted to go, and the boys nodded in agreement. All right, I guess, Shannon said. Looks like we're taking the sledding crew to McDonald's. We all got into 3 different cars and spent about an hour at the restaurant eating and talking. Even Jack and Suzanne joined us, which was a big deal since her dad usually didn't eat fast food. I could tell Jack was there to make sure I was okay. I was polite and sat away from Shannon, mostly watching the kids eat and play on the indoor jungle gym. Nick was a little too old for that now, and usually didn't play much at McDonald's. But he still enjoyed the attention from Bridget and liked playing with her. It made me smile to think how good big brothers they could be to her someday. After lunch, Shannon invited everyone back to her house. I decided to skip that, saying I had promised to take the boys to a movie that afternoon. I thought I had probably spent enough time with Jack and didn't want to overstay. I sensed Shannon understood and gave me a quick hug when we left. Of course, I had to give Bridget a big hug too, and promised we would do this again soon. Even the boys hugged Bridget, and then we were on our way. We went to the movies that afternoon, watching 2 films back to back. My boys usually loved going to the theater, so I let each of them pick one they wanted to see. We enjoyed popcorn, snacks, and sodas while watching the movies and grabbed some fast food to eat on our way home, as it was almost dinner time by then. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed fresh tire tracks from a car that had been there before us. Once inside the house, I could smell Bud Roberts' cologne in the air. Clarissa was standing in the kitchen, looking happy. She tilted her head and asked, "What's wrong, Patrick?" I shook my head, hugged each of the boys, and told them I'd see them at church the next day. They understood I wasn't staying there, but they hadn't asked many questions beyond that. At least Clarissa was thoughtful enough not to bring Bud around when the boys were present. I felt a strong wave of anger at the thought of what could happen if that changed. As I drove back to my hotel, I thought about how I felt. My frustration turned into determination when I turned on my laptop and started reading through messages between Clarissa and Bud. Sure enough, the most recent messages were from that day. Clarissa: "He just showed up without any notice and took the boys. No call, nothing. This is really hard for me. You need to fix this." Bud: "Don't worry, babe. I've got this. Just stay calm. He'll be watching for my left jab and won't see my right hook coming." Clarissa: "He didn't show up last night. Didn't answer his phone. His cruiser was at the office when the guys and I went out to eat. It was still there at 9 when we got home. What's going on with him?" Bud: "I'm not sure about anything strange. I checked my GPS. Drove by and saw his office light on. I guess he's just there because he doesn't have anywhere else to be. I'll find out more." Clarissa: "You should check on me first, Lowell. Mama's getting a bit restless. You know what I mean?" Bud: "I'll be there in 20. I couldn't keep reading and turned off the computer." Clarissa knew I had been at the sheriff's office late last night, which might lead to some questions for Bud later. Luckily, Christmas was coming up and Bud was planning to take nearly 2 weeks off. After next Tuesday, we wouldn't see him until after the new year. It was now 9:30 p.m. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Shannon. "Munchkin is asleep. You really wore her out today. Want to come over for a late glass of wine or two?" I quickly replied, "Be there in 20. By the time I got ready and arrived at her cozy house on Front Street, only about 15 minutes had passed. I hoped Shannon wouldn't think I was too eager, but why would she invite me over for wine this late at night? Maybe we really had a special connection. I could hope. I knocked softly, knowing Bridget was already in bed. Shannon opened the door, wearing a comfy set of soft, plum-colored pajamas. I stepped inside and took off my coat, hanging it up. "Hello, gorgeous," I said as we shared a warm hug. "Hello, handsome," she replied. We shared a gentle kiss, and it felt like our bond was still very strong. The soft fabric of her pajamas felt nice, and it was natural to hold her close as we continued to kiss. "Come here, you," she said playfully, leading me to her sofa. Once there, I knelt beside her, leaning in to kiss her deeply, my hand softly touching her face and hair. Shannon seemed to enjoy my touch, responding with a gentle arch of her back. We stayed like that for a while, simply sharing the warmth between us. The connection felt easy and unhurried, as if we were both happy just to be together. I gently caressed her, appreciating the moment as Shannon smiled softly in response. As we spent time together, I could feel the emotions between us growing stronger. After a while, I paused and helped Shannon adjust her blouse so she could feel more comfortable. We continued to share a warm embrace, and her presence was both comforting and reassuring. Shannon took a moment to gather herself, and I gently kissed her hand, appreciating the simple connection we were sharing. The atmosphere was filled with mutual respect and understanding. Finally, I moved to sit beside her, and she smiled softly, her eyes closed, clearly at ease with the closeness we were experiencing. We continued to enjoy the quiet together, content in each other's company. The connection between us felt natural, and the moment was about more than just being close. It was about understanding, trust, and a deep sense of care for one another. I could sense Shannon's anticipation as I gently held her, deepening the connection between us. "Oh, Patrick, that feels nice," she whispered, her voice filled with warmth and trust. I continued to hold her close, offering comfort and reassurance as our bond grew stronger. Shannon relaxed, clearly at ease, and I continued to support her, making sure she felt safe and cared for. We shared a quiet moment where words weren't needed, and the bond between us was undeniable. I stood up to adjust, and Shannon responded with a soft smile. I moved to sit beside her again, and she settled in comfortably, showing her trust in me. We simply enjoyed each other's presence, appreciating the closeness and warmth we were sharing. The moment was filled with mutual respect and understanding, and it was clear that our connection was about more than just the physical. It was about a deep and genuine bond. I could feel the strong connection between us, something that felt both powerful and meaningful. Shannon leaned forward slightly, focusing entirely on me as she expressed her care and affection. The moment was filled with a sense of trust and mutual appreciation. I did my best to support Shannon, recognizing the strong bond that had developed between us. The connection we shared was unlike anything I had experienced before, and it was clear that this was more than just a fleeting moment. Perhaps it was because she hadn't been in a close relationship for a while, or maybe it was the deep gratitude she felt after I had helped save Bridget. Whatever the reason, the bond between us felt incredibly strong and genuine. I gently guided Shannon to sit beside me on the sofa, allowing us to continue sharing this moment of closeness. We both felt a deep sense of connection, and I could see the appreciation in her eyes as we held each other close. The atmosphere between us was warm and filled with a sense of mutual respect and care. We stayed like that for a while, simply enjoying each other's company and the comforting bond we had created. As we shared the quiet moment, I could see that our connection had grown stronger, built on trust, understanding, and respect. "Oh, Patrick," she said softly, "you make me feel so wonderful." The closeness we felt was undeniable. "Shannon, you make me feel amazing," I replied, feeling a rush of emotions. With gentle care, Shannon encouraged me to lie back, showing that she really wanted me to feel valued and appreciated. The moment was filled with deep feelings, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Shannon's kindness made me feel cared for and secure. As we lay there together, the worries of the world seemed to vanish. Nothing else mattered but the bond we shared. Shannon cuddled close to me, and I held her tightly. I felt loved, wanted, and safe, feelings that had been missing from my life. In that moment, I realized I was truly in love with her. "You certainly know how to make a girl feel special, Mr. Quinn," Shannon whispered. "I always try to make you happy, Miss Sullivan," I said with a smile, giving her a quick kiss. We stayed wrapped in each other's arms, enjoying the closeness. I didn't think about anything outside our little world. Shannon had a quilt nearby just in case, but for now, we were happy just being together. When she suggested, "Let's go to my bedroom," I was ready to follow. Watching her walk down the hallway was lovely. We both settled under the covers and shared a sweet moment together. An hour later, we had spent time together and lay in each other's embrace, feeling fulfilled and connected. It was just after midnight, and I could start to feel sleepy. "Patrick?" Shannon asked. "Can I ask you something?" I sensed we were about to talk about what our future together might look like. "Of course, you can ask me anything," I replied. "What will happen when everything with your wife and your boss comes to a head?" "Well," I said, taking a moment to think, "to be honest, I'm not sure. Right now, it will be a victory just to avoid serious trouble. After that, keeping my job until I can find something else will be my next priority." "Do you think there's a part of you that wants to go back to Clarissa, even after everything she's done to you?" This was the moment I had been waiting for. A few weeks ago, before I really got close to Shannon, I would have done anything to save my marriage. My kids deserved at least that much. But now I saw that staying in a marriage just for the kids might cause more harm in the long run. "Shannon, I want you to know something," I said, looking sincerely into her eyes. "I don't know what will happen in the next few minutes, hours, or even days. I can't guess where I'll be in 5 years. The only two things I know right now are that I feel happy. I'm happy right here and right now. For me, that's enough." "And what's the other thing you're sure about? You said there were two." I moved a little closer. "The other thing I know, Shannon, is that I will not take Clarissa back. Even if there comes a time when she wants to talk about getting back together, I won't consider it." "So, where does that leave us?" "Only you can answer that, Shannon." but I promise to be in your life as long as you want me to be." With that, we shared a warm moment that made our bond feel stronger. That night, Shannon and I enjoyed a sweet moment before drifting off to a peaceful sleep, holding each other close. Although I didn't want to, I woke up around 6:30 and quietly left the house. Shannon showed her care for me with soft gestures as I went out, but I felt a little nervous about slipping away without Bridget noticing. The hard part was that I didn't really want to go, but I had plans. I spent Christmas Eve with Nick and Jake, treating them to a nice meal. We went to an early Christmas service at St. Matthew's, then spent time with Shannon and her family after, though her father, Jack, stayed quiet as usual. Afterward, we returned home to open presents. That night we had the house to ourselves, and I didn't even feel the need to ask Clarissa where she was. It didn't concern me. She had plans with the kids on Christmas Day and would spend a few days with Caroline and Martin in the cities. I felt a bit hurt when Clarissa didn't invite me to join them at her mother's new place, but thinking it over, it was probably for the best. Usually I would have spoiled Clarissa at Christmas, but not this year. Instead, I decided to treat the boys. Clarissa was upset too and commented on my choice not to get her a gift, saying it would have helped with appearances for the boys. Since we hadn't even spent Christmas Eve together, this just showed how much she was focused on herself. Maybe it had always been there and I just hadn't noticed. Love can do that to you. Knowing that Bud would be off work until after the new year, I started making my plans for keeping myself safe and getting some justice. I called my plan Operation Bitch Slap. I took a few days off and even called in sick around the holidays while Bud was away. There wasn't much going on at work, so I thought I might as well work from home. I took a good look at the computer while Clarissa was at her mom's, busy with the kids. I gathered all the information I needed, and then it was all about organizing it so I could make the best use of what I had. Chris and Tanya were a huge help in this. We went through countless emails and text messages from the time Bud and Clarissa got together. The phone records showed almost 2,000 calls between them during that time. Bud hadn't called me even a small fraction of that number, both during our friendship and while I was working for him as a deputy. Once we sorted through most of the details, we could see what Sheriff Bud Roberts really planned for me and how far he was willing to go to keep control over my family. 1. Elmer Suggs. Bud wanted Elmer to falsely claim I had arrested him without reason and to accuse me of more issues as well. Given everything I had done for Elmer over the last few months and the local veterans' support in keeping him away from Bud, I felt confident that Elmer would stand by me. This was handled. 2. Financial matters. As chief deputy, I managed a lot of the department's daily finances. Nothing huge, most expenses were simple. However, even though bills were being paid, Bud had moved over $10,000 of department money between accounts for reasons that were unclear, which looked suspicious. This made it seem like I was careless since some bills were paid from accounts they shouldn't have been. Luckily, Tanya quickly fixed all the transactions, making sure the records showed everything was managed properly. This was handled. 3. Misuse of funds. Bud Roberts had also moved an extra $3,000 from the department's petty cash account to an account at our local Wells Fargo. The petty cash account needs to be tracked with receipts and has a yearly limit of $15,000. This Wells Fargo account was opened in my name. Once again, Tanya was a great help and reversed the whole transfer. The account was still in my name, but now had a zero balance. It remained open only because the paperwork showed I had opened it, despite Bud's efforts to change that. The bank president, who was a friend of Bud's, and I needed to talk after everything settled down. Bud had found a way to open an account in my name without proper permission from the department. Fortunately, since all transactions are now digital, there wouldn't be any record of money moving from the sheriff's department to that account. 4. Team matters. Although it wasn't put into action yet, Bud planned to pressure some of our female deputies to make claims against me and other deputies, suggesting problems in our workplace. So I called everyone in the department for a surprise class on workplace behavior and respect. I made it clear that any harassment would not be accepted. I also had private meetings with each department member. If Bud had been around, we couldn't have done this. I made sure to keep records of our training to show my commitment to a respectful workplace. The female deputies thanked me for the training, along with some of the male deputies. I felt we had built a better understanding after that, and everyone knew my views. 5. Property and evidence. The entire situation with moving department property and evidence could have caused serious trouble for me. Without Jeff's confession and Tanya's quick thinking, I might have faced a long prison sentence. Being a former police officer in prison is tough, and former officers often have a hard time there. Thankfully, we managed to recover all the evidence, and the needed procedures were followed. At least, I hoped they were enough to convince a judge. Bud also had many other minor issues he wanted to blame me for, like messing up payroll records and the maintenance logs for the department vehicles. He was trying hard to make me look unqualified. Chris, Tanya, and I worked through each problem together. By the time Bud came back to work on January 3rd, we had corrected everything, and all records were back to normal with electronic signatures. Throughout this, Bud's messages to my wife showed a boldness that shocked me. I had considered Bud a close friend, but this whole plan of his was intended to undermine me and create issues in my personal life. It made me really angry that he would go so far. The fact that Clarissa was willing to go along with things just to improve her own status really hurt me. Bud Roberts was a risky person. Bud Roberts was unpredictable. It was clear to me that Bud Roberts needed to be stopped. Thinking about all this led me to a decision. Sean Patrick Quinn was going to run for sheriff of Mason County, and Bud Roberts would be supporting me. He just didn't know it yet. Bud Roberts hadn't officially said he would run for re-election as sheriff of Mason County, but everyone figured he would. With the new year gone, it was only a matter of time before he began his campaign efforts. He had plans to speak at every local service group and was looking for other opportunities to show his experience for getting re-elected. Thanks to Chris and Tanya, I now had 3 binders filled with printed text messages, emails, and phone records. Tanya had even managed to trace the IP addresses on all the emails. She did a great job adding more storage to Bud's email and cell phone accounts to hold all the new emails, which looked like they had come from Clarissa's office account. Simple texts wouldn't have taken up much space, but they needed it for the many messages they exchanged. At least I felt better knowing that Clarissa was not finding better connections. All the emails now appeared to be sent by Bud Roberts from his work phone. This wasn't a big issue since text messages don't show up on the county's phone bills. Tanya hadn't done the same for any phone calls between Bud and Clarissa because those calls would have been documented on paper bills. I felt very sure I had Bud Roberts and my soon-to-be ex-wife in my sights. All I really needed to do was take action. I learned from Karen Landingham that Bud Roberts was set to speak on the first Monday in February at the noon meeting of the local Red River Falls JCs. The JCs, or Junior Chamber of Commerce, were the second largest service organization in town, filled with many young professionals and entrepreneurs. Their meetings usually had over 200 members. The biggest group was the local Lions Club, and Bud Roberts would likely get himself scheduled to speak there as well. The last weekend in January was approaching. I had been spending a lot of time with the guys lately, going out and hanging out at the farm before heading back to my room at the Skyline Drive Motel. When I wasn't working or with the guys, I was often having dinner with Shannon and Bridget at their home. It wasn't about being worried about being seen together, but I wanted to keep things smooth between Shannon and her dad. I knew that if Shannon and I got closer, her father, Jack Sullivan, would want to talk with me. He was very old-fashioned and really cared for his daughter and granddaughter. On the last Saturday of the month, I got a surprise invite from Suzanne Sullivan to join her family for dinner that evening. I thought about saying no, but eventually decided to go. I arrived at their home around 5 p.m. Their house, about 5 miles northwest of Red River Falls, sat on a hill at the family ranch and had an amazing view of the Red River Valley. The house looked like a log cabin but was built like a modern mansion you might find in any neighborhood. It was beautiful, and I could see Suzanne worked hard to keep it that way. Even though it was late January, the days were getting longer. Shannon and Bridget were already there, and Bridget welcomed me warmly when I arrived. Shannon and I shared a quick hug, both knowing there was something special between us. "Hello again, Patrick," Jack Sullivan greeted me, holding out his hand. He looked serious. "Hi, Jack," I replied politely. "Thanks for having me over for dinner." "Dinner can wait," Jack said. "Before you take off your coat, would you mind walking out to the barn with me to help with a few chores?" Suzanne and Shannon exchanged worried looks. I felt it was best to agree to Jack's request. "Of course," I said. "I'd be happy to help." The cattle barn was about 50 yards from the house. Jack and I walked there in silence. Inside, there were about 50 pregnant cows, and I helped Jack for around 30 minutes, unloading big round bales of hay and putting them in feeders. The hungry cows started eating right away, and Jack and I watched them quietly. As we stood at the gate, Jack finally opened up about something. Suzanne and I lost 2 sons before Shannon was born, and even then, Shannon was a tough pregnancy for her. She had to stay in bed for the last 3 months, and the last 3 weeks were spent in the hospital to keep her and the baby safe. We walked slowly away from the barn and over to a large area where some big bulls were peacefully eating. Shannon's birth was very hard on Suzanne. It really took a toll on her. The doctor said that Shannon would be our last child. We asked other doctors too, and they all said the same thing. Jack turned to me directly. Patrick, what I want you to understand is that my daughter and granddaughter mean everything to me. My wife and I worked hard to start our family. I wasn't there when Shannon needed me. I wasn't there for Bridget either. I noticed tears in Jack's eyes. It was clear he felt he had failed as a father and grandfather. But, he said, gritting his teeth, I promise I will do everything I can to protect them now. So, Mr. Quinn, what are your plans for my daughter and granddaughter? I know you're married and have children, so what is your relationship with Shannon? My heart raced and I felt nervous, not because Jack was a threat, but because I didn't want to lose his friendship and respect. I really wanted both. I saw him as a father figure and needed his approval. My wife, Clarissa, has been seeing someone else for over 2 years, my boss, the sheriff, I said in a flat voice. Jack's eyes grew wide. My boss has also been trying to get rid of me at work and take me away from my family. This was all planned out by Bud Roberts and my wife before I started my job. I didn't see it coming. I thought things would get better with Clarissa, but they didn't. Everything changed last November when I caught them together in my home. Bud and I were supposed to be at a work conference together for 2 weeks, but he came back early to be with my wife. Jack looked away almost in shame, but I continued. I really don't know what my future holds, Jack. Bud Roberts has tried to create trouble for me at work, and all I know for sure is that I will be getting a divorce from my wife. I talked to Father Shane about my situation, and he thinks the church will likely let me end my marriage. The main thing I know is that I am truly in love with Shannon and Bridget. If they will have me as a husband and father, I promise to love them, care for them, and protect them for the rest of my life. After a moment of silence, Jack looked me in the eye again. I'm really sorry, Patrick. I had no idea. I can't imagine how hard it has been for you to go through all that just to help that little girl, only to be left behind by your family. I want you to know, Jack, that when this is over and Clarissa and I are divorced, I plan to ask Shannon to marry me. Will you let me, Jack? Will you be my father-in-law and allow me to take your daughter's hand in marriage? Jack's serious expression softened, and his eyes showed warmth. He stood up straight, looking proud, and held out his hand. I took it eagerly. Patrick, it would be an honor to have you in the family. When the time comes, I can't think of a better son-in-law, he said. We shared a warm embrace, and I felt his love and respect. We walked back to the house for dinner and found Shannon and Suzanne in the kitchen while Bridget watched cartoons on the big TV in the family room. Both women looked relieved to see Jack in a happier mood. Let's eat, he called out, and both women smiled as they started to set the table. As Shannon walked past me, she touched my shoulder and whispered, What was that about? I'll tell you later, I said. She gave me a knowing smile and went back to the kitchen. The meal was delicious, the conversation was fun, and the family time was warm and comforting. After we finished dessert, I couldn't help but reach for Shannon's hand. Suzanne glanced at Jack, who simply winked and smiled back. We spent the rest of the afternoon and evening in cozy company, enjoying a lovely fire in the big stone fireplace while watching The Wizard of Oz and The Sound of Music, both favorites of Shannon and Bridget. Bridget sang along to every song, knowing them all by heart. I sat on the love seat with Shannon, my arm around her. With our worries behind us, everything felt more relaxed. Jack seemed to feel the same way. Later that night, I said goodbye and thanked Jack and Suzanne for their kindness. I asked Shannon to walk me to my truck. On a chilly and peaceful January night, I said goodbye to Shannon. I knew she was curious about my talk with Jack, but I assured her that she would find out soon enough. Before I left, I wanted to share something important. I love you, Shannon Elizabeth Sullivan. I love you with all my heart, and I will always love you. She gasped, and a few tears rolled down her cheeks. I love you too, Sean Patrick Quinn, so much. We shared a warm hug that felt both long and too short. I watched her in my rearview mirror as she stood in the driveway, watching me until I was gone. As I drove back to the motel, I dialed a number on my phone. My kids were at my sister Beth's house for the weekend, playing with their cousins, so I knew where Clarissa and Bud Roberts were. I had told Clarissa that I would not visit the farm this weekend, and Bud had made it known that he was out of town for county matters. It seemed that those matters would include being with my wife. After a few rings, Bud finally picked up. I'm busy, he said. You don't sound busy, so I assume you're free to talk. Why do you keep bothering me, Patrick? He sighed. Just listen, Bud. I know where you are and what you're doing, so there's no need to pretend. I want you and Clarissa to know it's over. I'm done with this struggle. I'm accepting that things will unfold as they will. I simply want a chance to sit down with you both and figure things out. We should be able to be reasonable for that, don't you think? Are you serious? You actually sound like you're trying to be calm for once, Bud replied with a laugh. I am serious, Bud. I just want to work out a fair arrangement for all of us. As long as you don't interfere with my job, I'll accept that my marriage to Clarissa is over. I'm doing this for Clarissa and our kids. When do you want to meet? How about tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock at the farm? The kids won't be back until dinner, so we should have enough time to talk. Okay, Patrick, that works. I'll see you then. Make sure to give Clarissa my best, I said with a smile. I will... Wait, what? Bud said, surprised. I hung up before he could ask more, so the meeting with Clarissa and Bud was arranged. Everything was coming together. But I needed one more person involved to make it complete. I typed another number into my phone and pressed send. The person I called was not pleased. I arrived at the farm right at 2 o'clock. My guest hadn't shown up yet, but I was sure he would do everything he could to be there. His future depended on it. I let myself into the house. It was still mine, and if all went well, it would stay mine for a long time. Bud Roberts and Clarissa were waiting for me in the living room. Bud reached his hand out to me, and I tried to gather my courage to shake it. Patrick, I'm glad you could come. I think both Clarissa and I agree that we want to put all this behind us and move along. Can I get you something to drink? He and Clarissa were each holding a glass, probably to help calm their nerves for what we all expected would be a tough meeting. My relaxed attitude as I walked in seemed to make things feel a little lighter. Sure, Bud. Please grab me a glass from the cupboard next to the microwave and some ice. Then check the back of the pantry. There should be 2 big bottles of vinegar. Move those and you'll find a bottle of whiskey behind them. Okay, Bud replied, looking a bit confused but willing to help. I gave Clarissa a smile that wasn't sincere, and she returned one that was just as forced. We stood silently while Bud searched for the whiskey, and I knew when he found it. Wow, Patrick! Yep, he found it. Is this what I think it is? Yes, it is, Bud, I replied. Johnny Walker Blue. I've searched everywhere in Red River Falls for this and never found it. Ah, yes, it was a gift from a friend. The truth was that Caroline and Martin had sent it to me after I met them in Minneapolis. I didn't want to keep it at my motel, so I hid it in the pantry. Why hide it with the cleaning supplies? Bud asked. Simple, Bud. That way I knew Clarissa wouldn't stumble upon it. I couldn't help but laugh. Bud managed a quick smile, but it faded when he noticed that Clarissa didn't find it funny. Then again, she never did. Come on, Clarissa. Even you have to admit you're not really into cleaning. Why do you think we pay Mary Maids $500 to come clean once a month? If you don't mind, Patrick, I wouldn't mind a taste of that whiskey myself, Bud said, hoping for an invitation. Oh, definitely not, Bud. You can take my wife, but you can't have my Johnny Walker Blue, I said with a genuine laugh. For some reason, it felt nice to share a laugh with Clarissa and Bud, even though they probably thought it was because I was resigning myself to the situation. But the truth was, the joke was on them. Soon, another guest would arrive, and the real surprise would be revealed. I had brought a briefcase that I placed on the coffee table. I settled into my favorite chair and poured myself a glass of Johnny Walker Blue while Bud watched, wishing he had some. I took a long sip and enjoyed the smooth taste. That's some good scotch, I said, opening the briefcase and taking out 2 thick binders filled with information. What's all this? Bud asked. We'll get to that soon, I replied, glancing out the window. My guest should be here any minute. Well, Bud began as he and Clarissa sat on the sofa, you wanted to meet us. What did you want to discuss? I set my glass on the table. Bud and Clarissa, it seems clear that you both want to be together. I thought we should have a gathering to celebrate that. But first, Bud, I have one question for you. Okay, Patrick, what is it? Do you care for Clarissa? Bud looked at Clarissa and then back at me. Of course I do, Patrick. That's what this is all about. Then let me ask you another question. What do you value about her? What's the point of this, Patrick? Simple, Bud. You've been involved with my wife while you were married. You say you care for her. I want to know what you truly appreciate about her. Bud stared at me, surprised. I already knew the answer. Although he claimed to care for Clarissa, he saw her as a prize. He wanted to leave Margaline for someone younger and more adventurous. He wanted to prove himself by winning someone else's love. I appreciate her because she's beautiful and she makes me happy, Patrick. All right, that's a start. Physical attraction matters, but I'm asking about something deeper. What do you really value about her? Bud laughed. I think I understand what you're doing. You're not here to be reasonable. You want to show Clarissa that you care for her more than I do, hoping she'll return to you, right? No, that's not it at all. Clarissa and I are finished. If nothing else is clear today, that definitely is. I know her well. We've known each other for over 12 years since you started at the police department. What's her favorite color? I asked you a simple question. What is Clarissa's favorite color? Bud just stared at me, speechless. It's yellow. Clarissa loves the color yellow. It reminds her of the sun. When she was young, her bedroom had yellow decorations, sheets, curtains, and even a yellow rug. Yellow always makes her smile. Bud stood up and walked behind the sofa, shaking his head. Do you know what Clarissa's favorite song is? Bud asked, looking at her and then back at me. It's Bittersweet Symphony by The Verve. She listened to it a lot after her parents got divorced in high school. I decided to keep asking questions. Do you know what toy she always wanted for Christmas but didn't get until I gave her one as a joke a few years ago? It was an Easy Bake Oven. Do you know what her biggest childhood nightmare was? Getting eaten by a plant after her teacher brought one to school? And do you know what her favorite band is? It's the Dave Matthews Band. I walked over to Bud so I could look him in the eyes. What I'm trying to say, Bud, is how well do you really know my wife? I could talk for hours about the real Clarissa, the one nobody sees in public. I know that she wanted to be a bulldozer driver when she was little because her dad did that for work. I know the real Clarissa, Bud. I loved her for 12 years of marriage and nearly 15 years together. I glanced at Clarissa. She was sitting on the couch looking away from us. I could see tears in her eyes, and some had already fallen. Are you happy now, Patrick? Does it make you feel good to see Clarissa sad? No, Bud. The happiness of my wife is what fulfills me. This whole situation brings me no joy. You asked for this meeting, didn't you? What did you really come here for today, Patrick? To make a point. And that is? To show that you really don't love Clarissa. To help her see what she has given up for the idea of being with someone important. I wanted her to realize that Bud doesn't truly know her, that he only wants her because she is with someone else, and that being with her makes him feel good. Lastly, I wanted this meeting to bring it all to an end. You're mistaken, Bud replied. You just said you were done with Clarissa. You're going in circles. You're right, I did say that. I mean every word. But I told you both months ago that I would end your relationship one way or another, and today is the day. In fact, I said, noticing a car pull into the driveway, that relationship ends right. I walked over to the front door as my unexpected guest hurried up the steps, and I swung the door open wide, greeting him with enthusiasm. Look, everyone, I said loudly. It's our old friend, the Mason County attorney, Mr. Marion Lawson. What's he doing here? Bud demanded. I was about to ask you the same thing, Lawson replied. You never mentioned Bud Roberts would be here. Please, everyone, sit down. Everything will be explained soon, I promise. Hey, Marion, Bud offered to serve drinks for us this afternoon. Maybe you'd like something to relax? Quit messing around, Pat. You called me here for a reason. Get on with it. I have more important things to do than sit here and listen to your games. Wow, you're not exactly a polite guest, Marion. Is it okay if I call you Marion? Lawson just rolled his eyes. Anyway, unlike Bud, I was actually going to offer you a sip of my Johnny Walker Blue since we might be working closely together soon. What are you talking about? Bud? Do you know what this is about? All right, I said, giving in. Social hour is over. Let's get to business. Have a seat. I grabbed the binders and handed one to both Bud and Marion. Gentlemen, what you hold in your hands is important evidence, and each of you has played a role in this situation. The binders contain copies of thousands of emails, text messages, and other communications between my soon-to-be ex-wife and Sheriff William Roberts. These messages clearly show the affair that's been going on between my wife, Clarissa, and the sheriff for the past 2 years. Bud's face turned bright red, and he looked like he was about to explode with anger. Marion looked shocked. So? What's the big deal, Quinn? Lawson asked. Why should I care about any of this? The big issue, Marion, is that these messages and emails also detail various plots and accusations against me, all orchestrated by Sheriff Bud Roberts. He aimed to ruin my career, get me wrongfully imprisoned, and destroy my marriage and relationship with my 2 sons. These communications outline plans to have me investigated and charged with financial crimes, wrongful arrests, embezzlement, falsifying records, and over 80 counts of tampering with witnesses and evidence. If Bud Roberts had succeeded, I would have been in prison for many years. This is ridiculous, Patrick, Bud shouted as he stood up. You're making a serious mistake. I don't know how you got hold of these emails and messages, but they're completely false. They won't stand up in court. Clarissa and I will press charges against you for invasion of privacy and hacking, and anything else I can think of. This will all disappear, all of it. Judge Prohaski will throw out this evidence without a second thought. You took personal information and things that belong to Clarissa and me. Marion Lawson nodded as Bud spoke. He's right. You'll need to explain how you got that information, and if it was collected improperly, it will be thrown out right away. A good lawyer could dismiss this case almost before it even starts. But they didn't know everything yet. The real mistake is on your part, I replied calmly. Sit down and look more closely at those emails and text messages. Bud glared at me, but slowly took his seat again. He picked up the binder and flipped through the emails and texts. He seemed to recognize them, but he was missing an important detail. Bud, do you know what an IP address is? Of course I know what it is. Good. Your Internet Protocol address is linked to every device on a network, whether it's public or private. Every computer, smartphone, laptop, tablet, or any device that connects to the Internet has an IP address. Just get to the point, Patrick. You're trying my patience. Here, Bud, look at this. I handed him a sheet of paper. This is an email memo you sent to everyone in the sheriff's department and other city offices. Do you remember sending it? Yes, Patrick, I remember. What's your point? Look at the bottom of that email. You sent it from your county-issued computer, right? Bud nodded, still frustrated. Good. Now compare the IP address at the bottom of that email to the IP address on the emails you sent to Clarissa over the last 2 years. Bud hesitated, but did as I asked. As he compared the emails, his eyes widened and his face went pale. He began flipping through the binder frantically. Each email contained the same IP address as the memo. Patrick, what did you do? How did you do this? What did he do? What did he do? Marion Lawson asked anxiously. He set me up, Marion. He made it look like I sent all these emails from my office computer. I never sent anything to Clarissa from there. Bud was breathing hard. Marion Lawson looked shocked. Oh, but there's more, I said excitedly. Look at the transcripts of all your text messages. Check the number they were sent from. Bud looked closely and recognized the number as his work smartphones. He hung his head and couldn't find the words. I'm having trouble believing this. It can't be real. Oh, but it is, Bud. Look at your phone. Check your email and text messages. You'll see everything I printed out is right there in your sent items, too. Every message you sent to Clarissa is also stored in your work phone. Feeling shy and doubtful, Bud took out his phone and looked. He made a sound of surprise as he saw I was telling the truth. Wow, Marion Lawson said softly. I thought you had everything sorted, Bud. You promised me this would be managed. It was managed. Clearly not, Bud. Look at the mess you're in. Quinn's got you stuck and it seems like you can't do anything. Quinn isn't the only problem, Marion, I said firmly. Take a look at some of the messages in the binder. She began to browse, but then paused. There are over 200 messages between you, Bud Roberts, and Clarissa. They go into detail about your conversations and plans. You sneaky little one, Lawson murmured. I may not have enough here to build a criminal case against you, but the gossip about this will spread fast across the Midwest. You might find a lot of embarrassment coming your way from the county officials for using your work devices for a questionable connection with Sheriff Bud Roberts and the wife of his chief deputy without my knowledge. Your name will always be tied to Bud Roberts. Your career will be over. You could get disbarred and never be able to practice law again. You would become a social outcast everywhere you go. Lawson turned his head away, troubled. But you're not in as much trouble as Bud. I have enough information to get him and my soon-to-be ex-wife in serious trouble. Clarissa will be very old by the time she gets out of her situation. Clarissa gasped at my words. Finally, Bud gave in. Okay, Patrick, what do you want? I stood and looked at both Bud and Clarissa. First, I want what I said earlier. You and Clarissa are finished. Your relationship is over. There will be no more contact at all. If I find out you two are still involved in any way, I will make sure you both face serious consequences. Do you understand? And what if I don't agree? How do you plan to stop me? What power do you think you have? I might not be ready to give up quite yet, Patrick. I can't explain how happy I am to repeat what you told me a few months ago, Bud. But let's just say that whatever I decide to do is unavoidable. The look on Bud's face when I echoed his words was priceless. And you have lost, Bud. I'm not the only one with these documents. Many others have this information, too. We both know I'm not a genius. I couldn't have done all this alone. There are trustworthy people who helped me. I bet you won't tell me, but I'll ask anyway. Bud laughed weakly. Who? I can't tell you directly. But here's a hint. Think about someone you know who is close to someone in the local tech business. I could see Bud thinking hard. After a moment, his eyes lit up. Chris Hayes, he said with a bit of anger. Oh my God, Patrick. You're really counting on that decision? Really? She's anything but a bad choice, Bud. She left MIT because she found it too easy. She's so smart that they couldn't teach her anything new. I can see her working with the sheriff's department one day, I added. What sheriff would hire her? I paused for a moment. I would. Are you serious? Yes, Bud. This brings me to my second condition. We already discussed the first term, which is that you and Clarissa need to end your relationship. The second is this. You will announce at the JC's meeting on Monday that you will not run for re-election as Mason County Sheriff. At an appropriate time, you will also say that I talked you into running for sheriff and that you fully support me. Clarissa, who had been softly crying on the sofa, suddenly sat up when she heard I wanted to become sheriff. And along with your support, I continued, I will also expect the same from our county attorney. Lawson simply shook his head and rolled his eyes, not because he didn't think I'd be a good sheriff, but because he knew there was no way out of this. I held Bud's fate in my hands, along with Lawson's professional future. I still had more information on Marion that I wasn't ready to share yet. I'll save that for later. And what if I refuse? Bud asked, even though he already knew the answer. Then I will hand over all the evidence to the state authorities. An investigation will follow. Many criminals will be set free because of your actions with the evidence. You will face many serious charges, and you will be responsible for letting dangerous people back into our neighborhood. You will likely be tried and end up spending many years in prison. No matter what, Bud, you won't come out of this in a good place. Just do it, Bud, Lawson complained. You're finished, and so am I if we don't do what he wants. Just complete your term, step down, and quietly disappear into retirement. I'll do anything you say, Patrick. But why not let Clarissa and me be together? You've said you plan to divorce her anyway. I promise I'll follow your wishes and say what you need me to say, Bud urged. No. Why not? You have me and Lawson trapped. You have Clarissa, too, for her part in this. You should just give up now. You are really good at manipulating things. You and Clarissa aren't meant to be, and I'll make sure that happens. If I hear even a hint of your plans to be with her, I will act. I've had enough over the past 2 years, and I won't give you any chance. Do you understand? My feelings about this are very strong. I won't let you and Clarissa build something just because I want to be tough. You can't change this. Do you understand? Bud stood up slowly, looking less sure of himself than before. He walked to the front door, paused, and said, "You win, Patrick. I'm going home to my wife. I'm really sorry, Clarissa." Then he left my house for good. All Clarissa could do was stand there, shocked, with one hand over her mouth and the other on her stomach for support. She hadn't said a word in 20 minutes, too stunned to think clearly. Marion Lawson put on his coat and moved toward the door. As he was about to leave, he stopped and thought of something. "You know, Quinn, the longer you let this go without dealing with it, the more it looks bad on you. Have you thought of that? What's to stop me from coming after you later for allowing this? Sure, Bud Roberts will face troubles, but you have a lot at stake too," he said with a small smile. My mood changed right away. It was time to take a stand. "Let me make something clear, Marion. I'm running for sheriff. I plan to win this November. When I am sheriff of Mason County, the county attorney can either be my friend or my enemy. While I can't stop you from being the latter, if you choose that path, know that I now have some important supporters. You saw what happened with Bud Roberts today, so let me ask you something, Marion. How old are the girls in the pictures and videos you have saved on your home computer?" "Oh my God," Marion said, looking shocked. "I think it would be great if you could support me for sheriff in the newspaper. A nice article in the op-ed section of the Red River Falls Sunday paper would work," I said with a friendly smile. Marion didn't respond. He just nodded and hurried to his car. I turned to my surprised wife and said, "Well, that went well. Now I'm going to take a moment for myself upstairs." My wife had been quiet since I got home. I left her alone to think about things. Things in my life changed a lot after that. The next morning, Bud Roberts announced at the JC's meeting that he would not run for re-election as Mason County Sheriff. He shared stories from his years in law enforcement that everyone enjoyed. Local reporters were there expecting a different announcement, but this news was still important. I had texted Bud and Marion that morning saying I would wait a week before announcing my own candidacy. This would give me time to see if anyone else would run and to assess my competition. Some people in the community mentioned they might want to run for sheriff. One was Tom Wellington, a local business owner who was part of the Citizens and Law Enforcement Coalition. He would need to take special training in law enforcement if he got elected. He often wrote opinion pieces for the local paper, usually about politics. I didn't see him as a major threat. Another potential candidate was Amy Van Deeken, a deputy in the department. She believed it was time for a woman to take the lead as sheriff. I liked Amy. She was a solid deputy with about 5 years of experience. She was seen as someone to watch for the future, had good ideas, and was respected. She could be a strong candidate. The only other serious competitor I was concerned about was Pete Sturgeon from the Red River Falls Police Department. I knew he would run against me if he became sheriff, and if he was elected, I might lose my job as captain and chief deputy. With all the good feelings I had gotten from the public after handling Bridget's kidnapping and the situation with Amber Rigby, I thought I could become more popular than Pete Sturgeon. It seemed like Pete thought so too. A week later, I announced that I was running for sheriff at a small press conference. Soon after, both Pete Sturgeon and Amy Van Deeken said they would not run for Mason County Sheriff. This was good news for me because it let me invite Amy to join my campaign. I wanted her to learn how to run for office. Even though this could mean a future challenge from her, she happily accepted and turned out to be one of the best choices I made for the campaign. So it was just Tom Wellington and me left as the only candidates for sheriff. Bud Roberts and Marion Lawson both promised to support me. But really, what else could they do? I had some leverage over Bud because of various issues, and I had Marion in a tight spot over a delicate case. Among all the help Tanya had given me over the past few months, what she did regarding Marion Lawson impressed me the most. Tanya, being as skilled as she is, found evidence on Marion's home computer linked to a case we were both working on that was about to go to trial. It was quite lucky that Tanya uncovered a hidden file on Marion's computer. Knowing that there was inappropriate content on his computer was one thing, but Tanya took it further. All Marion needed to do was destroy that computer, and the evidence would be gone. Tanya cleverly mixed that information into family photos of Marion and his family. Anyone looking at the photos would never suspect anything was wrong. But the FBI knows how to spot things like that if they got a tip or had a good reason to look. Tanya then added those photos to an online album on Lawson's Facebook page and a Microsoft Cloud account under his name that he couldn't access. It looked like they were uploaded from his home computer. To an ordinary person, they were just family pictures. To a computer expert, however, they showed videos and images of young girls involved in inappropriate situations with older men. If discovered, Lawson could face a significant amount of time in prison. All I could do was stand back and admire Tanya's work. She was amazing. If all she wanted in return was a chance to work with me and Chris Hayes, I might just agree, because I'm the kind of person who puts others first. In all seriousness, though, the biggest changes in my life happened at home. I never told Clarissa that I would take her back or suggested that we might stay together. With her hopes of being Mrs. William Bud Roberts now shattered, Clarissa put all her efforts into improving herself. She became the perfect partner, even though I never asked her to. Our home was always clean, a big breakfast was ready each morning, and we had family dinners every night at 6 o'clock. I quickly moved all my things out of the Skyline Drive motel and back to the farm. Instead of returning to the master bedroom, I chose to sleep in the guest room. I did buy a whole new set of sheets, pillows, and a mattress to make it feel fresh. The boys were happy that I was back home, and they didn't seem to mind that I wasn't in the same room as their mother. Though Clarissa and I didn't talk much, we were polite to each other. I never shouted at her or threatened her, and I never raised my hand against her. We exchanged small talk, but that was about it. With the campaign in full swing during the spring and summer, I was very busy with work and running for office. Shannon, Bridget, Jack, and Suzanne all helped out when they could. Both Bud Roberts and Marion Lawson gave me great endorsements in the local newspaper and during interviews on TV and radio. The newspaper supported me over Tom Wellington, and more endorsements from respected local figures helped the Sheriff Pat Quinn campaign. I still found time to see Shannon whenever I could, usually on Friday or Saturday nights. I told Clarissa I had campaign events to attend, which was often true, but afterwards I enjoyed time with Shannon and Bridget. Shannon understood the need for privacy and never complained. It felt like we both knew our lives were headed in the same direction, and Shannon had no doubts about it. The moments we shared were amazing and fulfilling, just like that first time on her living room sofa. I found myself needing her as much as I needed air. As the election drew closer, Clarissa began coming to some of the fundraisers and events. She didn't try to take charge or get too involved, but she made sure everyone knew she was my wife, signaling her hope to be the wife of the Mason County Sheriff soon. A small part of her still believed that her dream of being with someone important might come true. It happened late one Saturday night in September. My boys were staying with my sister Beth for the weekend, spending time with their cousins. I got home late after another event for my campaign. Shannon had to work a night shift because a coworker needed time off. It was almost 11 o'clock, and I thought Clarissa had gone to bed like usual. I took a quick shower and went straight to bed. I was almost asleep when I heard the floorboards creak outside the guest bedroom door. I noticed someone was there. The door slowly opened, and I saw Clarissa standing in the doorway, lit by the light from the master bedroom. She walked toward me with a closeness that felt unexpected. "Patrick," she whispered, "are you still awake?" "Yes, unfortunately," I groaned, turning away from her. "Can it wait until morning? I want to talk to you about us." "Do we really have to talk now? I just got home, showered, and I'm tired. Let's discuss this in the morning." She sat on the bed and rested her hand on my arm. "I want you to come to bed with me, Patrick. It's been a long time. I'm ready to think about our future, and I want to start that future together." "I can't." "What do you mean?" "I mean I can't." "You can't what? Be with me? Are you feeling unwell or just tired?" Frustrated, I sighed deeply. "I can't be with you because to really connect with someone, there has to be a real connection. I don't feel that for you anymore, Clarissa. Everything changed when I found out what happened." "I know you still care about me, Patrick. You know I care in some way because I'm the father of your kids. That matters. But I can't do this anymore." It was clear to me that she was still caught up in her own thoughts, thinking everything centered around her. For almost 7 months since I ended her relationship with Bud Roberts, she seemed to believe that our calm interactions meant I wanted to patch things up. She really thought our marriage could be saved, and that I would take the first step. I had to be direct. I am not interested in being close with you, Clarissa. I don't feel that way anymore, and I can't forget what happened. You chose to be with Bud, and I won't act like that didn't happen. Please, Patrick, I'm trying to save our family. I wish you would fight for us, too. I want things to go back to the way they were. I want back the man I fell in love with. According to you and Bud, the two of you fell for each other. Just so you know, I worked hard for over 2 years to make our relationship better while you were with him, letting him take advantage of you. And then a year ago, when I was in trouble, where were you? What were you doing when my life was on the line? I know I wasn't there for you right away, Patrick, but I'm trying now. Can't you see that? Look at what I've done for you in the past few months. I've followed your requests, trying to be a good wife and mom. Doesn't that count? I've even been taking my medication to feel better about us. Why did it take Bud for you to realize that? Why wasn't I enough for you to want to try harder for me? Me, the father of your children? Patrick, that doesn't matter now. What matters is that I'm here with you. I want to fix our marriage, move on, and leave the past behind. We can make this work. I know we can. I just want a chance. No, Clarissa, we can't. There's nothing to fix. You want everything to go back to normal for your sake. You've hurt me deeply and made me feel ashamed. You chose to share what was ours with someone else for 2 long years. Do you have any idea how that feels? Just give me a chance, Patrick. Come to the bedroom with me. I promise I can help you forget everything that has happened. I'll give you my all. I'm ready to make your dreams come true, Patrick. Just give me a chance. Please. I stood there, admiring her. She looked lovely, and I had to admit it. For over 2 years, I had wanted her love. And now, even though I planned to divorce her after the election and her life with Bud was falling apart, she finally seemed to want me. My heart raced and my thoughts swirled with frustration. I felt a need to share this struggle, and sadly, Clarissa was the target of my anger. I wanted her to know what it felt like to be lost, to be betrayed. I needed her to understand the pain I felt when she chose to leave. More than anything, I wanted her to feel the weight of my emotions. Clarissa, I started, my voice firm, I need you to be honest with me. During your time with Bud or his friends, was there anything you didn't share with me? What do you mean? Did you ever cross the line we agreed on? Absolutely not. I would never do that. It goes against everything I believe in. Good, I replied. That means we still have something to work with. If you truly want to save our relationship, then we need to talk about everything clearly. Patrick, that's not what I meant. I want us to reconnect and not focus on what went wrong before. I understand, but I need to know you're serious about saving our marriage, I said. I wanted to see how committed she was. I believe we can start over without going back to the past. Clarissa, this moment is very important for us. It shows if we're ready to move forward. Let's face this with honesty. You either make the moment or let it make you. What will it be? Are you ready to save our marriage by letting go of some pride? Or will you hold on to pride and give up on us? She paused, deep in thought. Good night, Clarissa, I finally said after a long silence. Please close the door when you leave. All right, she said a bit nervously. Okay, Patrick, I'll do what you want. Just promise me you won't hurt me. She had agreed, and it felt surprising. I promise I won't hurt you, I answered. I followed her from the guest room back into the master bedroom, which I hadn't used in almost a year. Clarissa stood at the foot of the bed, looking uncertain. The soft light from a lamp filled the room. What do you want me to do? She asked quietly. Just lie down and try to relax. It will make things easier, I suggested gently. She settled down, and I noticed how lovely she still looked. Even after having 2 kids, she had taken care of herself, staying active with biking and hiking around Red River Falls. I found the lotion she mentioned earlier in the drawer. I poured a little into my hands, trying to keep the mood light. Clarissa closed her eyes as she focused on staying calm. I moved slowly, feeling the tension in the air. It was an odd mix of emotions, but I knew this moment was important for both of us. The steadiness I felt was different than I thought. It was less about control and more about understanding our relationship. Clarissa had been distant for a while, and it created a gap between us that seemed hard to cross. Standing there in the quiet room, I could see the worry in her eyes. She was feeling vulnerable, and for the first time in a long while, I understood how delicate our relationship had become. I took her hand gently, guiding her to sit on the edge of the bed. "Clarissa, we need to talk about what's happened between us," I said, keeping my voice calm. She looked down, sadness written on her face. "I know things have been tough," she said softly, her voice shaking a little. "I don't want to lose what we have." "Neither do I," I replied, sitting beside her. "But we can't keep doing this, hurting each other and ignoring the real problems." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm scared, Patrick. I'm scared of what might happen to us if we can't fix this." "We can only move forward if we are honest with each other," I said gently, reaching out to wipe away a tear from her cheek. "We need to be ready to work through the hurt, but not by causing more pain." Clarissa took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "You're right. I don't want to keep living like this." We spent the next hour talking, truly talking about our fears, our frustrations, and what we needed from each other to heal. There was no easy fix, but for the first time in a long while I felt a spark of hope. We agreed to seek help together, to try to rebuild what we had lost, not by controlling each other, but by supporting and understanding one another. As we held on to each other, it felt like a small step forward. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. This was my moment. Then, just like that, it happened. Out of nowhere, the thought of Shannon popped into my head. Suddenly, my anger faded. Everything I thought I wanted to do slipped away. A wave of calm came over me, and I slowly moved away, creating space between us. Clarissa seemed to think the worst, believing I was moving away to act in a more aggressive way. Instead, I got up, reached down, and picked up my shorts. Just as quickly as it had come, my tension melted away. I understood that if I lashed out at Clarissa, I would be no better than she was. She and Bud had gone out of their way to hurt me over the past 2 years. If there was one thing I could hold on to, it was knowing I had kept my promise to never hurt her on purpose, even after the lies and betrayal that had come my way. Clarissa sat up on the bed, wiping her tears. "What's wrong? Why did you stop? I thought this was what you wanted." "I thought so too," I replied. "But what I want most of all is to be able to look my boys in the eye and say that I never meant to hurt their mother. If I choose to go down a bad path, I won't be able to say that. I'm sorry, Clarissa, for everything. I know you wanted to make this work, but until you truly feel sorry for what's happened, it won't happen. The only thing you seem to regret is getting caught. You don't really want me. I'm not even sure you wanted Bud. What I think you wanted most was something to keep up appearances. And I need more than that. After everything I've been through in the last few years, I really deserve this." With that, I turned and walked back to the guest room, closing and locking the door behind me. I could hear Clarissa start to cry hard. "I'm sorry," she cried out. "I'm so sorry." She continued for over an hour before she finally fell asleep. Epilogue. "So help you God, so help me God," I said, eagerly shaking hands with Judge Chester Prohaski. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce the new Sheriff of Mason County, Sheriff Sean Patrick Quinn, Jr." With that, everyone in the room started to clap. The master of ceremonies for my swearing-in was Jude Palmer, one of the county supervisors. Now, I would like to invite our new sheriff to the podium. Sheriff Quinn has a few words he would like to share with us. Again, the room broke into applause. There were nearly 300 people crowded into the all-purpose room, which was an impressive turnout for a swearing-in ceremony. As I stood at the podium, I looked around the room and waved to my sons who were with my sister Beth and her family to my right. I smiled and winked at Shannon and Bridget, who were near the back with Jack and Suzanne. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "as my first official act as Sheriff of Mason County, I want to honor my predecessor, retiring Sheriff William Bud Roberts, for his 32 years of excellent service to the community of Red River Falls and as Mason County Sheriff." The applause erupted again, and I could see everyone from the Sheriff's Department was clapping. "Bud, would you please join me up here for a moment?" Looking surprised, Bud walked to the podium, and I held up a large gift. In honor of Bud's time as sheriff, we would like to present him with a special gift from the men and women of the Mason County Sheriff's Department. Bud, I am pleased to present this beautiful wooden shadow box to you. Inside, it holds an American flag, the seal of Mason County, a Mason County Sheriff's badge, your old Red River Falls Police Lieutenant badge, and a plaque celebrating your many years of dedicated service. On behalf of all of us here and the people of Red River Falls and Mason County, thank you for your outstanding service. I reached out and shook Bud's hand as I gave him the shadow box. I could see that Bud was truly touched and surprised by the gift. Truthfully, I had paid for it myself, even though I said it was from the department. I thought it would help him feel appreciated and build good feelings for the future. Wow, Patrick, I'm really moved. I don't know what to say. Thank you very much. It's a lovely day. Let's give one more round of applause for our outgoing sheriff, I encouraged, and the room burst into applause again. I also want to invite everyone downstairs after this to our large classroom, where there will be cake, punch, and coffee for a retirement gathering in Bud's honor. Bud looked surprised, clearly touched by the warm gesture. Before we head off to enjoy the cake and refreshments, I have a few things to discuss. There are announcements that I think you will all find interesting. Once Bud accepted his retirement and supported me, he became less present as sheriff. We rarely saw him, as he spent most of his time attending conferences or on vacation, trying to stay out of the office. This was beneficial for me because everyone started to see me as the head of the department. I might not have been able to take any huge actions without notice, but I could certainly find ways to avoid accountability. There were more retirements during the summer, yet Bud was hardly around to make the necessary appointments and promotions. Moving from deputy to sergeant or lieutenant were both promotions that kept individuals as part of the union, and I could handle those without much issue. Appointing a captain and chief deputy was more complicated. The Citizen Advisory Board had been part of the process for major hiring in our area for many years. According to our county and state regulations, using a Citizen Advisory Board for promoting a chief deputy and captain was a suggested practice, but not a strict rule. I discovered through some research that it was not a requirement, and ultimately relied upon the sheriff's decision. As many of you know, we've had several people from our team retire recently. We also made some changes in how we oversee our shared property and evidence room. Jeff McCauley has opted to leave that position to become the food service supervisor for the Mason County Department of Corrections. With Bert Fielding's recent retirement as our head jailer, I've decided to merge the role of property and evidence supervisor with the head jailer position. This new combined role will be a lieutenant's position within the Mason County Sheriff's Department, and I've set aside some funds to make the necessary improvements for a larger office space for this role. My first job as sheriff of Mason County is to promote Deputy Amy Van Deeken to a new position. The room filled with applause as Amy stepped forward to shake my hand, her smile bright with happiness. I was sure she would do an excellent job. What's more, merging these roles will save the residents of Mason County over $30,000 each year. The crowd cheered again. Next, we have 2 sergeant positions open in our department. One is for the day shift after Chuck Waterston retired, and the other is for the evening shift, which became available when Erland Barrington left. I'm excited to promote Deputy Danny Larson to the sergeant position on the day shift and Deputy Angel Ryerson to the sergeant position on the evening shift. The room erupted in applause once more as Danny and Angel came forward to shake my hand. My next announcement is very important. As things change here, I believe it's crucial to choose someone quickly for my previous role as chief deputy and captain. I took a lot of time reviewing the many applications submitted when I was chosen. Since it has been less than 18 months, those applications are still valid. Each applicant was exceptional, and we would be lucky to have any of them. However, one candidate stood out among the rest. He is someone I know and trust, well-liked and respected by everyone here. So I am proud to say I have selected Lieutenant Benito Ben Villanueva to be our new captain and chief deputy for the Mason County Sheriff's Department. Applause filled the room again as Ben stepped up. The surprise on his wife's and children's faces was wonderful to see. Ben and I shook hands firmly. I am counting on you, Ben. I won't let you down, Sheriff, I promise. Our shared look spoke of trust and loyalty. I chose to keep to myself that Ben didn't apply for the last position but had an application now. I figured Tanya could help if anyone had questions. As the cheers settled, I returned to the microphone. Lastly, with Ben Villanueva moving up to captain and chief deputy, His former role as day shift lieutenant is now open. The person I have selected for the lieutenant's role is someone with over 12 years in our department. He has 2 bachelor's degrees in criminology and psychology from North Dakota State University. He also completed a 6-month program at the Federal Law Enforcement Academy in Brunswick, Georgia, focusing on criminal investigation. So, it is my pleasure to appoint Deputy Christopher Hayes as the new day shift lieutenant and supervisor. Chris, please come up here. The room filled with applause as Chris stepped forward and shook my hand. Wow, he said. I believe you now when you say you keep your promises. I wasn't expecting this. You've earned it, I replied as the applause continued. Check your department mailbox, too. In there, you and Tanya will find an envelope with plane tickets to Las Vegas. I use my frequent flyer miles to get unrestricted tickets for you both. There's also a voucher for 3 nights at the Bellagio. Take your girlfriend down there for a few days and come back refreshed, okay? Chris laughed. I'll do that, Sheriff. Thank you. He returned to his seat at the back of the hall. I want to thank you all for being here today and for your patience during this meeting. It is a great honor to serve as your sheriff. I ask for your support as I lead this department to serve the citizens of our county. Take care, and may God bless our dedicated team at the Mason County Sheriff's Department. With these words, the room erupted in applause one last time. Jude Palmer took the microphone to thank everyone and dismiss the guests, who then moved downstairs for Bud Roberts' retirement party. Before Chris could leave, I called him back to the podium. Hey, Chris, can you come over for a moment? Of course, Sheriff. What do you need? One of my last tasks as Chief Deputy was to prepare an important notice. As Lieutenant, one of your duties will be to deliver notices and warrants when needed. So, for your first official task as Lieutenant, I am assigning you this notice. Do you think you can manage it? Chris opened the manila envelope and looked at the title page. Petition for divorce Sean Patrick Quinn, Jr. Plaintiffs Clarissa Marie Quinn. Defendant Chris grinned widely. I can handle that, Sheriff. You can count on me. Great job, I said, giving him a friendly pat on the back. Lieutenant Christopher Hayes began the journey toward my upcoming divorce. I walked downstairs to Bud Roberts' reception, shaking hands with guests, deputies, and supportive friends as I went. I wouldn't see Shannon and her family until later that evening when I would join them at the ranch for a private celebration. I hoped the night would be filled with happiness and connection with Shannon. My plan was to have dinner as her partner and leave as her fiancé. I checked to make sure the small ring box was still in my pocket. When I entered the room for Bud's retirement party, he looked at me, and we made eye contact. I narrowed my eyes and smirked, not bothering to hide my irritation with him. Bud noticed how I felt and gave me a shy wave, a smile, and a nod. That's right, you know what I mean. Get ready. There's a new sheriff in town. Hey, listeners. If you enjoyed watching this video and want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss out on what's coming next. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video with Queen Cheating Tales.